Good evening, everybody. Let's dispense with the formalities and get started. Roll call, Twilight.
Okay. Councillor Albert?
Here.
Councillor Colby? Here. Councillor Brunel?
Here.
Councillor La Rochelle?
Here.
Councillor Ward?
Here.
Councillor Lunt?
Here.
And Councillor Crawford?
Here.
Next.
First item is the technology budget, IT discussion.
Come on down, sir.
All right.
I know you and Norm had the question, but for the listening dot in the corner,
Yes.
let's maybe recap and see if anybody else might have some questions. So why don't you bring us up to speed, Mr. Albert?
Sure. So my piece of it that I've been kind of going back and forth with Diane and eventually kind of wrap Nick in was to talk about some of the what top level tickets, what we're hitting on consistently, and are we seeing a trend going in a specific area. And then the other side of that was to talk about our current state of readiness. I know when we had the discussion with the previous IT liaison, who was wearing many hats there, he had advised there was no set plan as it was more of a every year sit down and talk about what we wanted to address as far as equipment and software, et cetera. So I think we're going to sit down and maybe talk about where we're at and what other efficiencies we might be able to grab. And then maybe projects like the migration of Munis, even though it's not inside of the contract scope and language right now, talk about how we can better prepare so we don't have sort of the hiccups that we encountered this time around. So these are all things that we're going to have to talk about and maybe put some numbers around what falls inside of, what falls outside of.
And that'll all be done within scope of this budget this time around?
Yeah, so everything I just talked about would not, and none of that would end up in the budget that we're talking about currently.
It's just moving forward.
It's moving forward, exactly. Okay. Everything is as it sits right now. No changes, business as usual.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions of Nick tonight for IT guys? I know Norm was driving that bus to start for at least the dialogue. If he's got everything there, by all means. Everybody's good? Dismissed.
Well,
Thank you, sir.
That was pretty painless. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next item.
Is the planning board budget contracted town planner discussion.
Okay.
And in front of you, you should have Ben's memorandum. I made a copy of that, but I had emailed that out earlier. And also, I copied Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments Technical Assistance Policy as well.
Come on down, Ben.
I'm not Ben.
I noticed.
I wanted to say that.
Who are you? Ben, you've changed.
Who are I?
Yes.
I'm Don Fellows, Planning Board Chair.
Nice.
As you all know, for a number of years we've had assistance from a planner, I think since 2012. And in that time, we think as a planning board we've accomplished a lot. We think we've accomplished a lot for the planning board. We think we've accomplished a lot for the community. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but primarily Amanda's been responsible for that up until this year when she's shared the load with Ben. And I think from our standpoint, we feel very strongly that we need to continue a planner's influence. But some of you in the last, I guess in the workshop that I didn't attend, asked the question, well, what are we getting for our money? And that's why we're here tonight. I don't think we've been doing a very good job of explaining too, but not at the exclusion of a planner. So have at it.
I see before us here, Ben, I see the list that I think was the crux of what we were actually looking for at that budget workshop. So I went through the accomplishments that we know we accomplished in the past and looking at what we're looking at to do for the coming year. So why don't you just bring us up for the listening public in the corner what the goals for the coming year for you guys' time to be able to assist the planning board.
Sure. Amanda Bunker is here as well. She's been working with the town for the last 5 or more years. Excuse me. So the goals for the planning work over the next coming year have to do with completing the comp plan as the #1 priority. And as soon as that's done, there are going to be a number of items that rise to the top, the recommendations in this plan that are going to be the most important things for the town to make some progress on. And implementing those items will be something that the planning board will be working on over the coming year. So that could be making adjustments to existing zoning districts. It could be making adjustments to the existing ordinances. It may be that there's a need for additional ordinances in the town. One of the goals from the planning board has been as well to consolidate the land use ordinances, zoning, subdivision, site plan amendment, and a couple others into a single unified land use ordinance that would have common performance measures and standards across the different sections of that unified ordinance. Definitions would be the same, and it would add a lot of clarity, I think, when it comes to enforcement and development review. A couple other items that the planning board had discussed, and they're included in the memo here. I won't spend a lot of time with them, but issues related to planning for the waterfront properties that seem to be an area of opportunity for the town. I think there's a couple in particular in the Lisbon Falls area, and I think regardless of whether the town obtains an interest in those properties or not, there is a place for municipal planning and thinking about what appropriate access would look like, water view preservation, and having whatever happens on those properties in the future be an asset to the community. And then one other kind of related item that I had put on there from some of the things we've been hearing about the comprehensive plan so far, having to deal with Beaver Park and what a tremendous asset that is for the community, and how to improve items related to facilities and parking and other kinds of needs that you could potentially do as far as programming for that facility. So again, that's not strictly a planning board goal, but I think that's one of the previews, I guess, of things that could be coming out of the comprehensive planning process, is how much of a valued resource that is, and starting to think about what it could be over the coming 5, 10, 15 years.
Perfect. Questions? Anybody?
Sure, always.
Great. I know there was a lot of dialogue that night, so I appreciate the overview. You've spelled them out here, so you have the floor, sir.
Sure. Just a moment.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate you, man, and Ben coming in. And no question about it, over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of ground. I mean, especially from where planning board was 5 years ago. Not saying anything bad about the planning board, but there's a lot of hurdles that's been jumped over, and actually the process has actually met. You know, I think a business owner coming into town today actually has a lot smoother process going through, and a more can see the light at the end of the tunnel when they first start, versus the idea of not knowing how it's going to go. Over the last 5 years, things have changed a lot too. There's been just some crazy things the town's had to deal with, where, you know, who would have thought we've been dealing with a medical marijuana ordinance that actually changed every month, you know what I mean, to try to figure out where you need to be, or some other things too. So, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that's actually been worked on, you know. Coming into this year, I mean, one of the things that I was just hoping to try to figure out, and again, I'm just one member of the council, was the idea of there was a recommendation, and then the town manager's recommendation for this year's budget was a $21,250. I think that's what it was. And moving forward, I think it would be really important for us to and again, just want to let you know, I think it's definitely, well, we need the services. It's not a question of whether we need it or not. It's just more the idea of how we actually quantify it through the year. And even looking at your chart, you know, as far as for the upcoming comp plan, I mean, in the past, I know Amanda actually was very involved with helping with the grants on some of the projects we had, and there was a lot of time spent in different areas. And knowing that we need a lot of long-term planning, and that's kind of what you talked about the waterfronts and some of the other areas in town. I think it would just be going into this next year, if the the council allows, brings it forward with the budget and approves it, is to actually have it more defined, I guess, of what time frames are allowed for certain projects and which ones are, whether or not, the dollar amount that the contract is X amount of hours, versus the idea of, does that represent, one planning board a month for X amount of hours? And how many other hours is there, for the idea of other planning, meaning whether it's waterfront planning or down our village planning, we have a lot of different, hopefully, ideas of future planning that we need, and there's really no one on staff that actually has the hat to actually, or the time to do it. So, I mean, I think it's a needed service. And I'm not sure if, when you look at this chart, if you think about the last years, maybe between the two of you can come up with an idea, and I'm not asking for hours right now, but, I mean, did you ever put like an amount of hours that you actually have within the course of a year?
What I was going to say is that the annual contract, I always it was broad, but I said it was up to 3 meetings a month, which was usually 2 evening or a couple of evening meetings with the planning board, maybe either an extra LDC meeting or a council meeting. Probably the average was more 2 a month. And then on the billing, the invoicing, that lists number of hours for each month period, and also at the bottom there's a description of the services, what projects were worked on. It doesn't break it down individually by project, so it's not hour by hour which project it was worked on, but
over general.
Looking back over, we could look back over those invoices and kind of track. Well, okay, so it was this many hours, each month. These were the kinds of things taking up the time. Sometimes in a 3-month period, there were really like 2 things that were taking up all the time. If they were just, intense things like design standards or something else, it was like you're really only working on showing up to planning board and working on that one thing. Other times there were a lot of little things flying around, and it's, I think that's why I really recommend moving forward too, that continue to have the dialogue, kind of the constant check-ins, because there is always an element of the planning piece that has to be flexible and nimble, that you may say, well, we need to finish this by whatever it is by October, and then, the next month something else comes in and that takes precedent, and that happens all the time. And you just have to, it's like any other staff position here. You have your goals and things that have to get done, and then there's the other stuff that you don't plan on. And I think the planning position is very similar. I've always worked hard to really try to stick to those priorities. I tend to usually kind of work more directly with the planning board, but I think Ben and I have talked certainly about, that as he, wants to take over in this position, that it's really, the planner can talk more directly with the council more often, or with Diane more often. It's up to the town to decide, how that has interacted. There's been different town managers along the way, so I've had some different ways of doing things. But I think it's just a matter of open dialogue, that, as a decision-making body, you guys need to know what the priorities are, what the planner is spending their time on, and I think that's part of the duty of the planner and the planning board as well, to sort of keep that in mind. Is this the best use of that planning budget, and making sure you're getting the most out of what you need in terms of what's something that the planner specifically really should be doing, versus is that something that somebody else should be doing, or it's just not a high priority.
And I guess at least the other question is one of the things that I would like to see moving, if we could, as things move forward, is it's hard to, and I know this, it's always been kind of it's been a good relationship, but it actually is one of those ones where, if I asked, who is actually the one that if you have a question about time, who would you actually go to? Would it be the planning board, or would it be the town manager, or would it be the code enforcer? I don't think there's ever been any set procedure of who oversees, if you want to call it that word, or actually.
I just tell everybody.
What's that?
I just go to everybody.
Exactly.
There's some room for adjusting kind of a little bit more, the lines of communication. I think formalizing that a little bit more certainly will help strengthen the position.
And I think at the end of the year, it's a lot easier when you get through a budget cycle, when you're going into the following year, to say, this person, if this person was actually supposed to be responsible for the time allotted, how did it use? Was it beneficial? What did we complete? Versus the idea of actually putting it all on your weight, saying, okay, we paid you for the last year, tell us what you did. And and there's really no
This is
straight path.
The first time any council that I have worked for has asked these kind of questions about, thinking about, well, what are your hours going towards specifically, or, I think that's kind of the evolution of this position. It's still relatively new to the town, But I think they're good questions to be asking, and that it's not a bad idea to sort of bring a little more formality and organization to it. So.
Yeah. And in the past, when you first were brought on, I mean, there was endless things to do. You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean, there
there's
was
still
not,
endless
no,
things to do. They're
but,
just not as.
yeah.
There's been some really tremendous progress in these recent years, and I think that's a trend that you guys aren't going to be leaving right away.
Because we don't know what tomorrow brings, right? Yeah.
Don't, but I think that the vision that the community's had over the last years, I've seen it looking from, just 1 year at a time, and now you're looking out many years ahead in a way that you weren't 5 years ago.
Yep. No, we were just trying to maintain 5 years ago. I mean, it was the idea of, how do we generate and just, I guess it was a question of how do we bring people in and how do we get the energy going. And I think it's pretty easy to see that the energy has actually started now, and now it's how do you keep it moving and how do you plan so you can actually keep it going. So I guess wrapping up my questions, I mean, I feel that, what's budgeted is definitely worthwhile because I think there's a need. It would just be nice, I think, as we move forward, if that works, is just to actually have a way of actually defining it a little bit more. Because, I mean, one of the things we've been missing the big boat on is long-term planning and the idea of, we have situations in town where we've had people come in and try to look at develop areas and it didn't work. Why? I mean, and what can we do as a community? What can we do to actually get those wheels spinning so that the next person comes in, it just looks like a no-brainer? I mean, and I don't think we have the ability to do that within our town staff, only because everybody is wearing 3 or 4 hats. So, it's really hard for them to get to it. And I'm sure Don was raising his hand there, so I'm not sure if you
Just
would.
had a question of, most of what was written here is for the planning board, but if there's some other direction that the council would like the planner to take, like working for LDC or doing something else, that I would think would be defined somewhere too.
I think it's all relevant, though. It all connects.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But that's another piece, I think it's fair, that's another piece that's never really been formalized.
Yeah.
That over the years, that's evolved and shifted, and, that the LDC hasn't even been around very long. I mean, we had that group that came out after the 196 plan, and that became what it's become, but
and that's kind of why
I think, that's going to be something that can get worked out in the next contract period, too, to sort of say,
and
work out the details of, what Ben can accomplish and what sort of makes sense within his scope. And it's still it's still going to be a tight budget, so I think that's important to think about it strategically. As again, where are those planning hours best spent? Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? What's the most important thing to stay focused on?
And I think that's kind of where I was leading at from the beginning, is the idea of knowing just basically the time frame, what's available. And I honestly, with the LDC meetings, there's probably a large majority of them that really isn't needed to have a presence, but actually when you're getting close to a project or thinking about a project or needing some insight, those, I think if you know over the course of the year you have X amount of hours that you can play with, you would actually reserve those to the point where they'd be most beneficial versus the idea of, sometimes we can spend 2 hours talking about something that means nothing, so it happens a lot, it seems.
Yeah,
So.
and, I had in the proposal, those number of hours, that works out to be about 5 hours a week. And sometimes there will be an ebb and flow to projects and things that are going to the planning board and other meetings where it might be 3 or 4 hours one week and 8 or 10 hours the next week. But that was, I think for budgeting purposes, it makes it a little easier not to have a, rapid difference between 1 month's invoicing to the next. It's something that you can plan on, something you can budget. But I have had conversations with members of the board and LDC about, geez, I could be working on the comp plan right now if you didn't need me here tonight. So I think that those are the kinds of things, as we talk about the evolution of this work and thinking about priorities a bit more and thinking about how time gets used. One of Amanda's ideas that I liked, and I hope there can be some more discussion about, is what's going to be the best way to keep the council informed of some of these activities, whether it's every 3 months you get a kind of a summary memo, or if it's coming to a council workshop like this. But the idea is that planners have a broad set of skills and work across a lot of different departments generally. So if there were other things that the council had as priorities, or economic development, or the parks department, other things that could use a little more horsepower for some kind of limited time period, those are things that a planner might be able to assist with.
That's something that came up in our last meeting from the economic development side of the house. I know for me, one of the things that perception is that maybe there's some siloing, and that there isn't a whole lot of crosstalk. Only, I mean, I say not that it's never happening, but it's all about having these objectives and goals and have everybody rowing the boat in the same direction. Because I think that's where we're starting. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys are the experts. I'm just kind of looking at this from a 10,000-foot overview. In order to keep driving, we've had some great progress, but how do we continue to take that momentum you talked about, Fern, and then turn that into some realistic goals and objectives along the way, and then make sure that LDC, Planning Board, Economic Development, and the planners are all talking in a way that's meaningful and doing their part to drive towards those objectives and goals. So I welcome, is that a project management type of piece, or is that the planner setting the map and then the rest of I mean, I'm up in the air on this. I don't know. But I certainly think that it would be sort of, we would take a step backwards if we remove the planning aspect from it. And that's something that, I guess I see it at this point.
Yeah, I think coordination with economic development would be a good step. Just, have maybe once in a while have a meeting between the economic development director and the planner, just to say, what can planning help out economic development with, and, keep on the same page like that. I think would definitely be beneficial.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it will work out for Ben to continue. It was very helpful for me when I would come in like during the office hours during the day, a couple of times a month at least, meet with Dennison, planning board chair, touch base with Tracy or other staff people. So besides the nighttime meetings, hopefully as the planner is able to come in and during office hours and kind of cross-check with, I'd like pop in and see Ryan, I'd go over and see Tracy, I'd have my meeting with so-and-so. You come in for a couple hours and it could be tremendously, it's one up on emails. You can get 100 emails with all kinds of information, and you might have half an hour discussion in person that is more productive. So hopefully that continues to be part of the role that the planner can play.
One of the discussions from that discussion at the budget workshop, we've brought it up. It was said about what resources could the planner bring to the economic development position and in that side of the house. And then there were crickets during the budget presentation because that question never got answered when we went into the economic development budget. So what I would ask you is actually have that follow-up to see if we could actually get that information brought back to us. I've heard that criticism following one of the meetings specifically associated with that, is that just knowing what that answer could be, because we're seeing this here from a planning board perspective, but is there another piece that needs to be set into that priority associated with that? The other part that I would say, it's been a progression to get to here, because I think it was it 18 months ago now, Don, we talked first about planning board going after the goal of the comprehensive plan. And the fact is, and I have said from day one, I don't want you guys bound by a time frame. I want a document that actually is meaningful when we come out of it. So that approach has been the support from the council here is, okay, now we're seeing that coming to fruition, most likely in this coming year. It becomes the question, what's next?
Some of us kind of think once in a while that it ought to be done because we've started looking at it. However, it needs to be done right. It needs to be vetted. It needs to come to council.
Yeah.
The council needs to have input back. All those things. That doesn't happen overnight.
Right. I mean, and every time we've pushed in a different direction, the success out of it, I believe, is improved the end product. I mean, I know just getting the public input from the school side without having that dialogue until we actually had a venue there, it was missing. And the fact that anything that we can do, that actually has a better part of it playing out. I mean, then we can drift to the fire department. The fact is, having two people directly involved, and the only person that was talked to at the time was town manager, I think we're doing fires a disservice by having that stand off the page. So every step that we've done, yeah, it's taken longer for that end game, but I believe the end result is something that isn't going to sit on a foolish shelf and not be usable to anybody, because I don't think anybody wants that. So, the point that I'm making here is, it's that question, okay, once the comp plan is finalized in the coming year, what do we look at next? We got an opportunity here to be able to plan. So, please.
Doing the comp plan, creating it, that's going to create work in itself.
Right, absolutely.
If you look through the old one, the stuff that never got done, well, a lot of it never got done, but it had lots of objectives in there that we actually should try to attack.
For those of you who can kind of remember when we finished the 196 plan, that was a similar kind of big kind of planning push. And right after finishing that, there's this sort of feeling like, there's a lot of stuff in here we should get done. And it's almost overwhelming. And you just start plugging away, pick out the things that are sort of achievable or really, really important. We got that plan. We started right in on the design guidelines. We started right in on figuring out CDBG. So I think it'll feel like a similar process once the comp plan is done. There'll be some stuff that kind of rises to the top that planning board needs to tackle sooner rather than later. Or, okay, this was an outcome, Beaver Park or whatever, where, starting the wheels turning on how can we work towards some implementation. And there's definitely a big part of a planner's role to sort of figure out how to get those in motion. A planner can't do it all, but
Right.
It's definitely a piece of what happens when the town has officially adopted it. There's stuff that, and the very basic legal requirements too, that making sure that the ordinances are in compliance with the comp plan. There's a certain time frame, a certain window that the state expects ordinances will be brought into compliance. I don't know, I'll let Ben say for sure, but I can't imagine that would be a dramatic amount of work, but there will be some work needed to make sure that's in line.
Right. I don't foresee any major overhaul in the ordinances as a result of the comprehensive plan, but there could very well be some adjustments that need to get made to the wording, and there may be some zoning map adjustments that get recommended out of the plan. So again, I think Amanda's point was a good one, that the planner is not going to own the comp plan or the implementation of the comp plan. It is a community plan, and there will be a lot of things that the planner can help with. There might be some technical things that the planner can lead the way on or be the project manager. But there will be items in there that are going to take some more community discussion. There will be items in there that have budgeting implications. So there will be a coordinating role, I think, for the planner coming out of the comprehensive plan, as well as some project management work. So I think that's to characterize the type of work. That's probably going to be the nature of it.
Looking at your list that you've given us, it doesn't surprise me. I appreciate you coming in to actually share it firsthand, because when you get further down the list, you talk about waterfront planning in the Beaver Park. I remember that discussion from the planning board meeting when we talked about goals and that kind of stuff. It's good sharing it with everybody here associated with that, to your point of just communicating and getting what we're at least thinking out. And as a starting point for what are we going to accomplish in the coming year. So what else does everybody else have? Cassie, I know you had questions night of. Is there anything coming now that you're seeing content?
I just find it, like, the work plan fairly vague. I just wish it was a little bit more in depth so we actually got a better understanding of what exactly it was that is going to be worked on. I mean, I know it says complete the ongoing comprehensive plan update. What does that entail? I'd like to see more like goals, like of estimated like goal end times. You know what I mean? Like we can't. I agree with you. Like let's do this right, but also on the flip side of it, don't drag it out. You know, and if we're going to focus on 5 hours a week, like you had said, you know, potentially, let's make it the best 5 hours that we can, not waste it sitting in meetings where you could be working on something else, because I'm not about ready to pay somebody to sit there working, you know, sitting at a meeting when there's other things that are more important.
Setting the priority. Setting the priority. Yes, please.
Again, Karen Paradise. I would just like to say that I feel that the planners have been totally invaluable. I mean, it's just amazing, the information they've given us. It's, as a planning board, you know, we are amateur planners. We're not professional planners. And it's amazing what we don't know what we don't know. I don't think that in any shape the planner's job is done once the comprehensive plan is done. I think it's a moving document. I think it's always something that we're going to keep working on, looking forward. I think the town has made unbelievable progress in the past 5 years. And as much as I love the planners, it's not totally them. There's been a change in management and code enforcement and all. But we're all on an upward swing. And I hate to see that stop. I think we've worked really hard. And I think the planning board does need the support. I don't think it's something that we can rely on AdCog for, that we can call them and expect an answer right away. We can email Ben and get an answer right away. And he is the professional there. And as far as doing goals, Cassie, I understand that, and that is awesome. But again, we don't know what's coming up. Every month, every 2 weeks, we get a case. That's something that we couldn't even imagine. They're not all daycare homes and rear lots. We do get subdivisions. We've changed zoning. We've done quite a bit. I mean, I can only speak for the 6 years that I've been on the planning board, but you know, I was chair for 2 years, been vice chair, and I think that the planners have been amazing, giving us the guidance that we need. And I think we're in a very litigious society these days, and if we make a mistake, an innocent, naive mistake at the planning board without having the resource, I think we're going to spend that money on legal fees. And I hate to see that the person that makes the most in this town is the lawyer. I really do. And I just think that it's penny wise, pound foolish. And I would like to see the town continue on the upward trend it is. And I think it is in the planning board and the town's best interest to make the commitment. Another couple years, and if you want to actually see, I certainly know that Amanda has spent 20 hours a month. I've seen her here. I know the emails that go back and forth. Again, I was chair for 2 years, 4 years ago. You know, so 3 and 4 years ago, I was the chair. So I was the contact person. I know the amount of time Amanda spent. I know that Amanda has handled with our economic director, the grants. We just received a phenomenal grant that I do not believe we would have gotten if we did not have the planner. And I just think and again, we don't know that there won't be another one next year that we will be applying for, or 2 years. And if we don't have a planner, are we sure that we're going to be able to do the best job for the town?
Thank you.
Let me just acknowledge the goal. What I'm referring to is this right here is so vague. I'd like to see some projected goal end dates when you plan on accomplishing these. I'm not saying that it can't be pushed forward or pushed back. I'm just saying I'd like to see at some point in time an end. Like an end.
As far as comp plan, we have an end game for the comp plan.
I'm just saying in general, for any other plan for future use, any other plans that come in, I would like to see more of this is how we're going to do it. This is our goal end date. If it, like I said, if it has to get pushed back, it gets pushed back. If there's other things that take precedence, I completely get that. Nothing's flawless.
No, and everything's moving.
But I feel like there's certain things that have dragged on, whether it be good or bad.
Could I ask you what else you feel?
There's certain things, I mean, like the Route 196 plan. I heard that for so long, and to be quite honest, until I got into the council, I didn't even know what it was. I really didn't, as, you know, a member of society. So from the outsider looking in, you're looking and saying, what in God's creation are these people doing? What?
Sure.
So
I think until you're on the council, you can't totally comprehend what it's like. Same thing with the planning board or any other position in town. And I think if you're not involved, you would have no idea what the 196 plan is.
but just even for the
Any of those
public,
things.
so that way they know what is happening a little bit more in detail than.
I just think it's hard to predict. You know, I wish we were all psychic and we knew what was coming, but not knowing that. But I think the comprehensive plan definitely has an end, and you know, we're very close to it. We've worked really hard, you know, and it might not seem it to those that are not sitting in those meetings, and you know, but we have, and I think we're there. But I don't think the town planning is stopping once the plan is done. I'm sorry.
And I think you've got a fair point about the closer you get to a project, the more detail you need to see. And if you are someone who's watching at home or reading a newspaper, not dealing with town business on a day-to-day, it's nice to have an overview. But when you sit at a table like this or sit in the chair that the planning board sits in, or certainly where Diane sits, you do need to get into the weeds. And we have, Amanda reminded me that it wasn't included in that 3-page memo, but we have shared a kind of a project schedule that breaks down what looks like on that 3-page memo is 3 gray blocks that go out to October of 2018. But it's almost another 2 pages of detail that breaks down what happens between now and October. That was updated in January, got updated again in May. So part of that project management is keeping a task list of the critical path, the tasks that need to happen, in what order they need to happen, and how long each one's going to take.
And if I may, that may go back whether you do in the council packets, whether we, every, couple months actually get an update like we do from a lot of department heads, what's actually happening, what's on the agenda, just where you're at the moment, I think would help a little bit. That way there the council would be more in the loop of what's happening. That way there wouldn't be so much of a, year end, so where are we at type of question.
And I think that's something too that's the progress, the evolution here of the planner's role. That on the 3rd page, that sort of graph of projects during which blocks of time. Internally, working with Dawn and Dennis and Karen, they probably remember some of my crazy projections of what we were going to do each month. And every month when we'd have a meeting, something would change and we'd shift it a little bit more. But there was sort of this ongoing rotation, okay, here's the things we want to work on for next. Here's the things we think we're going to work on for the next month after that, and kind of project it out for 3 or 4 months. And you just, every time you meet, you say, okay, how did this shift? Did we get anything done? It's a moving, changing document, but that sort of thing, or something similar to what Ben has put together might be. I mean, there was a year or 2 ago, there was just so many things going on. That was the only way I could keep it all straight and try to figure out where I was spending my time, was this little moving chart of things that had to get done. And I would say, here's how much time I have. What's the most important thing? So speaking from how I would work it, that was something that I just worked on with the code enforcement and with the planning board. But beyond that, I think it makes sense to share that. I don't know if a month to month might be a little overwhelming, but definitely checking in on here's what we project we're going to be working on for the next 2 to 3 months, and that's about the range of comfort that I think I felt in terms of having a relative sense of what I was going to be working on was a couple months out. Beyond that, it's probably, but never know. So that's what I would say based on recent years.
Yeah, and for better or for worse, the planning position has not been a department head level position. It's I think there's some advantages and disadvantages, and I think one of the disadvantages perhaps is the regular communication in both directions, frankly, is not only progress but also updates on priorities that the planner should be spending time on. I'm guessing that is something that may be a focus as, again, we've talked about the evolution of this position, and it's really an evolution as the town is dealing with more complex issues, is dealing with those issues in a more professional way. And, frankly, I think if there were some more communications back and forth on a regular basis, it would not only help you when you talk to your friends and neighbors about what the planner's up to, but it would help the planner as well as other staff members get a sense of the priorities and the things that they should be spending their time on.
Don?
One of the things that's almost a standing joke now is our attempts to get at access management again.
That was the one I couldn't remember. I remember that was coming right after, and I was going to throw that
Always on
one
the
on.
back burner.
Slipping, and Amanda spent a lot of detail at one point, and then we got preempted by everything else. So, I agree you can't have progress if you don't have definite goals. And we probably would have lost sight of access management a long time ago if it wasn't on one of those goals. But I wanted to also say that planning board attendance is not necessary for a planning board, a planner all the time.
Correct.
But I do think that there is a time when they provide a different perspective than coach does, because they provide a different expertise. And certain meetings, if it's a hearing or some particular project of interest, they can oftentimes give us a lot of professional stuff right there at the meeting. Or as things come up, they can counteract them, and they might come from an applicant. The last part is we have had, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had what you could call strategy meetings with the chair of the board or the vice chair of both, and the planner and codes. It usually precedes our regular meeting by a day or so, or at least one a month. And that particular thing gets us on the straight edge to see where we're going, to get things done and to get them done in a timely fashion. So that's probably more important attendance than the meeting itself. So, anyway.
So Amanda asked the question, you gave me the redirect, and the fact is there anything that we're looking for increased communication to assist Ben to keep it on our radar, other than periodic reports? Anybody have any suggestions on that? Can we live there to at least give him what he knows he needs to do to be able to have a voice beyond just the planning board? Is that a fair assessment? I know I see the traffic because I get all the planning board emails and communications associated with that, but I'll be the first to tell you the fact that I'm looking at it from that perspective, and it doesn't really seem to be the liaison position to always move that kind of dialogue forward. I try to hit the highlights with what you guys are working on and hope that people get enough to be able to get what's going currently.
You could get a report from the planner to the liaison, if that were a direct report that way, you could get the council on a monthly basis.
I think monthly is overkill in that regard. I think if I'm hearing Amanda correctly, the fact is if we're looking at it like what are we going to accomplish in the next 3-month window or something to that effect that would actually meet the needs, because unless it's something definitively going to shift gears in that time frame, that would accomplish what we're looking at.
And I think the reality is we're talking about a day or less than a day per week with that 5 hours a week. So if you're getting monthly reports,
It's something else
not
that you're
the
not.
same as a monthly
I'm now
report from
generating a report
time
for the
of-
sake of
right,
generating a report, and I
exactly.
don't get to what I need to do. Right.
Right.
That's where I was living too. Okay. Anything else? Content on the subject? Diane? Anybody?
No, I think quarterly reports would work well, probably. No earlier than that, unless you've got something major going on that you can report on. But I think quarterly reports, summarizing what you've been working on and what you plan to work on in the future, if you even know that.
If you're communicating something, Ben, and you're passing whim out there, the fact is it's going to Dawn and it's going to Diane, it's going to myself, and it may make sense to inform the rest of the council. Just that nudge in the email chain to actually bring it elevated, we can cover it in the council communications to assist you that way too. You know, flag it, so bring in folks, this is what we're thinking and why. I think that would help us help you. Anything else? Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate you coming in.
All right, I know we got a gap between where we're at on the agenda and the public hearing was going to roll at 7. My question, I know we covered it at the last council meeting. Can you give us a recap of what you know about the budget if we're going to roll into that to at least fill that space with something other than show tunes out of me?
Yep, so,
No tap dancing?
Yeah.
so what I presented to you tonight was an updated
Yep.
manager request worksheet. And everything highlighted, the page, don't look at the page numbers because they're out of whack, because I had to take a PDF and convert it to Excel and play with it, so I could get the colors in.
Nice to have
so-
all that new technology.
I know, right? So everything in yellow is a change. Everything in blue is for further discussion based on our previous meetings. And everything in yellow that's a change is either something that was changed during a budget workshop or has changed since then because we filled some personnel vacancies and has resulted in changes in wages and benefits. Some have gone up, some have gone down, and there's still one more out there that I should know in another week. But that's really the crux of it. Everything in yellow is what's been changed. And then I also gave you a document highlighting what those changes are. The only thing I didn't include on that one-page document is any changes in personnel because of filling vacant positions and how that affected the benefits. I just didn't think you really needed to know that type of detail. But everything on this sheet is based on discussions from, it's this one document right here, based on discussions from the budget. So really what we have outstanding outside of the police and fire tonight, we need to discuss the, under technology, the public access channel, under assessing that part-time position, and then the contracted services for the planning. I think that's really
3 target items.
the only thing, unless I've missed something. I think that's all that's outstanding. Oh, and the use of unassigned fund balance, we had mentioned at the last meeting, last budget meeting. There's an opportunity to pay off debt early because it would be paid off next year to the amount of about $96,000. So if that's something you want to do, then I need to take it out of this budget. But with the changes that I've made so far, with the exception of the 2 items in blue, it has reduced the budget by about $75,000.
That's before those discussed, Tom, the items that we're going to discuss, is that right?
That's before those ones in blue, the planner, the cable access, and that part-time position, and then obviously the last 2 departments. And it doesn't include that $96,000. I left that in the budget because I wasn't sure what you wanted to do with that.
Is there anything that's unknown right now, health insurance or workman's comp? Is there anything that we don't actually have a definitive number of what that will be in this upcoming year?
Well, the workers' comp, that happens in January. So I have whatever's in the budget now reflects what the current rates are. And that's not going to change until January 1st.
And health
on the
insurance,
workers.
the same
Health
way.
insurance will change January 1st, but we built in an increase for that as well. What we don't know is, how people are going to make their selections when open enrollment takes place. But when you look at the unassigned fund balance, we also want to do an accrued leave payout, which will include health benefits. We can use it for that as well, but the accrued leave payout is if somebody gets done and we have to pay the accrued vacation and sick leave. Currently, none of that is budgeted. So we want to take $50,000 and set that aside out of unassigned fund balance.
Okay, so if we're cutting to the chase for just general consumption, page 21, we're looking at roughly the $850,000 increase this year, municipal side.
Yeah, and that, when you're looking at that, that includes the county
Right.
increase.
That's
I usually
everything.
back that
that-
out so you can see what your true municipal budget is.
Right. I'm just cutting to the chase
Yep.
on that, and then
Right.
you take debt service off there too. There's potential to take the 98 grand off that figure
Right.
to reduce that further.
Yes.
One of the things that we've not seen, do you have anything for revenues to know what the offset, to know what the true net
I haven't
increase?
yet, not yet. I've got to meet with Lydia to do that. You know, your largest revenue is
Right.
going to be the excise tax, and
I know your intent was to actually run it closest to the end to be able to get the best
Right.
estimate.
Yeah.
And that, I just didn't know where we lived on that one yet. Is there potential that that could go up? Give me something.
I know, right?
Always.
2
not
months ago,
proud enough
I
to
would have
beg.
said 2 months ago I would have said no, but there could be a potential that might go up a little bit.
No, you're just toying with me. It's not
What?
fair.
You
I
asked
know.
for it.
I s-
14-day plates up there, you know. So.
I mean, you know, you got to
Right.
include all the people that have moved into town too. That's extra excise tax. We just don't know when that's going to hit us. That's,
Does
Right.
this,
you know, that's when
May I-
they.
Please.
does this actually take into account the increase in the personal property tax that we have calculating it from the?
No, that's all on a different. That's on a different document.
So, but that would be considered,
That's when you
Revenue.
do the tax rate. That's when that's taken into
but
consideration.
I mean, that is something that will offset that.
Yes,
That we're not actually
yes.
calculating in this.
That's
so
right.
it
That
is-
and any new
It's a
value.
known anyways, right? So,
Any new value that she gets, and then if the
take a lot of houses to equate to just that one.
yeah, and the other thing, I'm not sure on the homestead exemption how much we're going to get back from the state. If it's going to be the same as last year, or if that's bumping up a little bit. If that bumps up a little, do you know, Alan, the homestead exemption reimbursement from the state?
No,
That's going up any?
I can't.
If it is, that'll help us.
It's not where I live at work
Yeah.
to know.
But the personal property tax on the Dingley Press, I wouldn't even consider that because you still have your 200,000 that we're starting with on the revenue side that we're not going to have from that school subsidy. So that kind of wipes that out.
But it's still something
It's a wash. Yeah. That puts us back to like
negative.
negative. Well, not negative.
Close.
Probably, yeah.
What about the number of new businesses that have come into the community? And I know Tracy's not here to probably answer this question, but if we could get a comparison to understand where we were at the end of last year and then how many new businesses have come in and then what that equates to or what we would hope that might equate to. I don't know if that's a realistic goal, especially with their new businesses, so you really don't have any reference point. But these are things that I think would be helpful for us to start to get an understanding of. You know, we have all these great things where we're talking about the progress and improvements here, but I think that the way that gets quantified for somebody who wants to get a quick overview is
Right.
last year we had this many businesses, this year we have this many businesses. Last year overall revenue generated by businesses was X, now it's this. So you can start to see that pattern happening and then how that might relate to one's tax dollars.
That's more of a Kathy question.
Okay.
Through the assessment, and I know she's got her list going on what she's capturing for new houses and also for commercial businesses. I mean, I was with her one day and I was rattling off new businesses that I had seen and they were all on her list, so.
One of our goals as a council coming in this year was communication with other departments. But I think that, and the constituents, and I think this is one of the areas where we can do a better job. We certainly can make it more, user-friendly and easier to digest. I don't know what that looks like. I say all these things, I make all these assumptions, but we obviously got to put in the work to figure out how we're going to do that and what's the right things to report.
Exactly.
But, I think it's definitely worth the conversation.
I think, when she gets closer to getting her field work done, it would be a good time for her maybe to come to council or at least put a report to council saying this is how many new homes that I'm capturing in this year's commitment, the value and what that value is, and how many new businesses. And some of it will generate real estate and some of it will maybe just be personal property. If you've got a new business, a new building that's gone up for a business, she's going to get real estate on that. If it's a new business like Verizon going into an existing building, you're just going to pick up the the increased value of improvements to that building, but then you're going to get the personal property tax part of that. And then is it Betty exempt? And if it's Betty exempt, we only get a portion of that back. So it's a lot of variables on
Yeah,
the
I was going to say,
assessment part.
and I think that's the thing. As I know, John Q. Public is driving by, and I'll use the easiest one 'cause it's the easiest one and the most visible right now. So I drive by Domino's. That's the thing.
Well, yeah, exactly.
If I'm thinking about, okay, new business, that means my taxes are going down. That's the general equation almost always. Perception
Right.
is we got these new businesses, but I think it's important to kind of quantify some of those things.
Yeah.
Well, that business occupies a building that already, so you can't count that twice, or, however we want to
Yep.
go ahead and make sure that people understand, because I think that gets lost in translation sometimes.
Yeah.
I think people think, oh, new business, and they don't take into account that it occupying the same footprint, so really, there's not a change there. But when people see 5 new businesses come in, they automatically think, why aren't my taxes going? There's a knee-jerk reaction there.
It is, yeah. But there is a lot of construction. She's going to pick up a lot this year, and what that shakes out to in the commitment, how much of it is in the TIF area, how much of it's TIFed, how much of it is Betty exempt on the personal property tax, and but it's too early right now for that. But as we get closer, we can have that discussion. But it all helps on that tax rate.
I think we're in a time frame now where you actually got to see increases. I mean, what we're looking for is an increase in value, not the idea of, oh my God, how many we've lost this year.
Right.
Right. Back in years ago where we had 130, 140 homes going under foreclosure and more following. I mean, there was a time of, next year, how much are we not going to get? So we're definitely in a better place than I think we've been in years past. So.
Yeah.
Not that spending is less, but, I mean.
It's one side of the equation.
Exactly.
Part of planning, too, is understanding where you're at. And so that growth, if we can understand what we're growing, then we can make focused efforts in that plan to try to target the areas we can get the most bang for our buck, especially when it comes to planning and other things.
One item from your list to revisit. Is there anything on the technology budget related to the Munis upgrade that we talked about that Lydia may needed additional resources? Is that dialogue set and we're set with this number in that?
I think we're set with this because this number in here includes, because we still are not sure yet, it includes still a full year with Trio. Even though I don't believe we're going to have a full year with those modules, some of the modules, some we will, some we won't, but we don't know the answer to that.
So this is the conservative number.
It is. And as we get closer to implementing some of the modules, then we can decide which ones we want to do 6 months with Trio. And then if we find out we need it for more than 6 months, we'll just buy another 6 months. But we're not going to buy a whole year for everything right at the get-go.
Right. I want to come back around, though, to making sure that we have an understanding, because I know that when we were in the workshop portion, we talked about having a point person, and I know Lydia's made it very clear that she cannot be that person. I know you've told me that it's difficult, if not impossible, for folks that are currently sitting in their roles to be able to provide to Munis. And I was in on that Munis meeting, and I didn't hear them come out and say to us that they would handle that migration of data for us. So when you say that we're set, this is reflective of those hours being accounted for?
Well, I'm not sure that, I can't answer that, I guess. Yeah. Lydia really needs to answer that.
Yeah, I think it's important before we put a bow on this
Right.
to understand that, because I don't want us to be in the same spot.
I thought that was an open dialogue.
Yeah,
That was my takeaway,
Okay.
too.
I think that's important and if Munis is committed to and said yes, and there's a cost associated with that, then we need to, that's right. I want to make sure that we're seeing that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And she's at a seminar right now, or she would have been here tonight, so.
I'm sure it's something we can tie
We'll
off.
talk about that again.
Excellent.
At
Thank you.
The next meeting.
Right, and I don't want to speak for Councilor Albert, but I'm going to let him do so because I've also heard traction associated with IT in general. In-house versus out. And I don't think it needs to actually play out right now, knowing that we're going to the next item, but I think maybe sometime either after police and fire, when this is done, allowing him the time to be able to vet that and see where he's living to at least float the idea for future discussion.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
That's very fair
Are
assessment.
you prepared to do so?
I am.
Okay. What else were we seeing for content?
Can we just actually go through that one right now and maybe make a decision on that prior? Or is that,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what the tower was for, right?
Yep.
That $5,000, I've known a few of you talked about that. Is that something we're just going to pull the plug on and actually just see what happens, or?
I think so. I think the worst case scenario is we're going to lose our spot. But I think there is on
Could you
that
explain
cable.
what that is? I mean, just so, I mean, we,
Well, through our franchise agreement, we have a cable access channel spot that's assigned to us, and if we're not using it, we won't get it. We won't although I did email Time Warner, and they haven't gotten back to me, but from what everybody else is saying, if you're not going to use it, you'll use it, and there are a lot of people trying to get cable access channel spots. I did talk to what's that place?
Harpswell?
Harpswell,
Yeah,
that's it. I did talk to Harpswell, and they're going through a change right now because of the FCC. They happen to own their own station. But they have talked about trying to get another station to see if they could bring some municipalities in. And she's going to keep us in the loop on that because that, if we should decide, if we pull the plug on this and we get a lot of complaints, that in the future we might want to hook up with them to air our meetings.
It's a shared resource, and the reason that I drove, and I'll be the one that fully stands in front of the public on this one, and I drove this bus. I wanted to see us save this $5,000 because I really do feel that what Harpswell's doing right now is they're on an over-the-air broadcast. So our current broadcast is through Time Warner Cable. So you have to have the Time Warner package in order to be able to see the town meetings. So if you just have regular over-the-air terrestrial antenna television, you don't get the Town of Lisbon meetings right now.
Right.
So that's one thing that Harpswell does. Theirs is terrestrial. If you have an antenna, digital antenna, you can get the Harpswell meeting. So if we can get partnered with them, I think our cost is reduced, especially because they own their own station.
Yeah.
And also that means it's actually offering more access to people who maybe aren't computer savvy. So there will be a pain point initially where if we pull it out of Time Warner, folks who have that will lose it. So they can get these meetings on our website right now. We put in a brand new website, and it's very easy to get to if you're not computer savvy. Miss Nato down at the library would be more than happy to help you.
Right.
We'll try not to bore you to tears with our meetings, but in the meantime, we are working to try to fix this so that it can be more accessible and at a lower cost to constituents.
Is that a recommendation?
That is a recommendation.
Do I have a second on his recommendation? Taking to take that line item from 5,000 to 0?
Yeah.
You guys good with that?
not really knowing. I mean, we've actually had a good feedback from the online, whether it's Facebook or actually just the idea of people will be able to go bring it up anytime on our website. We've had fairly large numbers. It's really hard for us to quantify who's looking at Time Warner because they can't give us those numbers. So I guess we only know is if it's
Once you
not
shut
on.
it off, you'll get the true number.
You'll get the true number, you know, and then we'll have to figure it out from there. But it's just, I think we're actually getting to a point where we're starting to pay for multiple different angles of this, and we have to stream it down if we feel that the online and digital is the way to go, the way we're doing it now. I think it's a shame to pay for, for an older service that may not be working for everybody. That's all.
I think it speaks volumes, too, that you said you had an email in at Time Warner and they still haven't responded to you yet. So I think that tells me where we are as a priority for them. So I'd much rather see us use our resources somewhere else. Really
Tracy's
would.
got something from the audience.
Please. Thank you. I couldn't see best podium.
Tracy Austin, School Committee. We also had this conversation when we were asked if we were willing to also contribute to the service, and our board voted not to, for reasons that you have talked about online, but also that the old school format of minutes have not gone away. We have people who, on both sides, in every organization that we have for a board or a committee, taking them, and they are accessible by walking into any of the buildings that will provide them to hand them out as well. So it isn't lost on people. If they want the information, there is some old school technology of paper that is available to them as well. But I just think that the costs that I've seen go up through the years for the service, and they changed your time, they changed your station, they changed your this. I just don't
feel that nowadays it's worth it anymore, but that's my 2 cents. But I just wanted to let you know what our board voted was not to contribute
The
to it
point of
anymore.
minutes is a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tracy, when was that? Sorry. Was
we
that
did-
just recently you
Just
voted?
recently, we did it last Monday.
So you haven't got the
It's
feedback.
fresh.
We were just hoping that you did it early enough to get the feedback if it was bad,
Yeah.
that's all. So.
Hey, I
No.
am okay with fielding those. I do think that nowadays with the technology, most people are dependent on the information being provided to them at all costs, and not so much ownership anymore that if they want to know the information, then it's on them as well.
You're feeding an expectation that just keeps getting increasingly worse.
You know, from time to time, we'll have a glitch on getting it over to Dennis to get it up on site so that it plays on that Friday after our council meeting. I think last week it wasn't there in time, was it?
Probably not.
And we have not to date, I have not received a complaint that it wasn't airing. Have you?
Twilight, do you mind if I ask you a quick question? I know under the old format, we actually used to burn down to a DVD, didn't we?
Mhm.
Do we still do that? No, we go straight to, okay.
It's on the hard. It's being taped onto the web, I think, at
Yep.
this point.
Yeah, it's going to the cloud.
Yeah.
It's
So
on
then we have to
somewhere.
download it, but we don't download it.
So,
to
but we
CD.
don't have the access, the technology anymore to burn it down to a disk, do we? The
We can
old
check
technology.
into that.
Yeah, the only reason I say that is if this becomes such I'm just trying to be proactive in our thought process here. If we get we do this and there's an incredible pushback while we're waiting to kind of lifeboat into a partnership with Harpswell or whoever, we could always explore the cost of DVDs is nothing. So if we needed to, on an as requested basis, create a disc, burn a disc of the meeting for somebody to come and pick up in the in our office. I think that's a cost that I'd be okay with.
I wouldn't float that lead balloon because now you're going with the freedom of access. The fact is, I want it every meeting, and you're expected to provide it.
Yeah.
I
Again, it's not an exact science. I
yeah,
get where you're
and
coming from.
I just don't want to. Again, you're enabling bad behavior, in my opinion.
But it's already available on the internet.
Right.
So I don't think we would have to because it's
Right.
I think you can download it onto flash drives
Right.
anyway now.
Yeah,
Instead of CDs.
I keep thinking back to there's always going to be.
I'm liking
one.
hearing
yeah.
that we're just following the move of what the school department's doing. I have a first, I have a second. Where do we want to live on
Third,
this?
Yeah, let's just
fourth,
I'm good.
fifth.
That item
Send
goes
it.
to
All
zero.
right, so
Chris?
reduce that.
All right.
he seconded it.
There you go.
We have first and a second.
Everybody else
That
is-
item goes to zero. All right, let's defer the other two till after for the respect of what we're actually here for the 7 o'clock. So let's move to the next agenda item, Twyla.
Which is the public hearing for the school budget.
Thank you for letting us play that discussion out, Rick.
It's all right. I usually do a PowerPoint, but I think that camera will pick it up anymore, right?
Well, not anyway, yeah.
All right, so if you don't mind, I'll just go on my laptop and, because the numbers are different from the last time.
Do you have a copy of the new numbers?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
One more, thank you.
Thank you.
So I've provided the council and members in the audience with an updated cost center, copy of our cost center, copy of our subsidy comparison report, and a definition of terms that they'll see through the warrant articles. Earlier this evening, the school committee did voted and adopted these figures. And so once I get my presentation going, I'll be able to go over these numbers for you.
Twyla. That is. No text necessary. Whatever it is, he fixed it for you, Twyla.
He did. He brought us a wheelchair.
Okay. The budget that the school committee approved this evening that we're presenting tonight is based on, a lot of the variables I think I talked to you about the last time I presented to you, a lot of the variables have come into play. Insurance was one of them. We had negotiations with both Teachers Association and the administrators. That's all been adopted. So the recommendations for this budget is the proposed budget includes an overall budget increase. And if you're looking at the subsidy comparison form, which is the easiest one to look at because it compares this year's to last year's, and that's the second page. So overall, the budget has an increase of $676,540, which is on the bottom right. But the actual impact to taxes is $493,786. The amounts that those amounts, the $493,776, which is the increase to the local taxes, does include adult education. The budget, as I talk about each year, includes a number of things. The total budget, contributing factors, any reductions, state contribution, total local funding. I usually provide a budget history spreadsheet or a chart, and then capital reserve and unassigned fund balance amounts, and then any remaining variables. And there is one relatively significant variable that is remaining, and that's something that I'll talk about, but that is in regard to the service centers. That's part of the approved state budget. The total school budget is a combination of state and local contributions, adult education, and revenues. This budget was impacted as far as revenues. We are utilizing $544,487. If you look at the revenue sheet or subsidy comparison sheet up at the top, you'll see it has amount from unassigned fund balance and anticipated revenue. The total amount that we have incorporated in this budget is, again, $544,487, which is $164,530 decrease from last year. Last year we used over the $403,721 in unassigned money, and we did not roll over the funds, that type of money, in last year's budget to cover that use again. So we have enough in there to cover the $194, which is historically the amount that we've used, but we do not have the additional money to cover the $403,000, and that was a result of decrease in state subsidy. There's a couple of things that changed on this form. The one thing you'll notice, if you look halfway down, you'll see the transition amount. That's something that we've always talked about. That was when the state did not fulfill the requirement of 55% funding of public education. The new formula does include those funds, but if you look at it, basically what's happened is instead of you raising it locally, it's just been put into the total additional funds. So before, the total additional funds and was added to the transition amount. Now that they've changed the formula around, there's no such thing as transition amount, but you will see an increase in your additional local funds. You'll also see an increase, and I'm not sure how this will impact when you set the tax rate, but the mill rate and valuation for the towns have changed as well. And that's something that's going to impact, when it's all said and done, that will impact local taxes. The state contribution, there was an increase of $371,191. It's at $8,864,185 for next year. And the local contribution is at $7,009,507, which is a $488,571 increase from last year. The total school budget that was approved by the school committee and being presented to you, to the public, and then to you for consideration, is $16,412,047, which is a 4.3% increase and that would be the $676,540. Some of the contributing factors to this budget includes the following items. This proposed budget also utilizes additional funds from the capital reserve and the unassigned account to offset the increase. I've already mentioned the unassigned amount was $194,270. The capital reserve is the same amount, $39,768. And we will need to do a transfer. The school committee will need to do a transfer at their next Monday into the capital reserve because the balance is less than that because we just upgraded the security cameras, or you approved the upgrade of the security cameras at the middle school. Half of the increases are a direct result. One of them was we have a half-time maintenance position that we've added back into this budget. Salaries and benefits, obviously, that drives the majority of the increases. And the main state retirement portion, which has been pushed over to property tax, has increased this year of $11,733, but that is actually now up to $368,692. That impacts our budget, and that's something that was put into that was moved to property taxes, I think, in like 2013. Our workers' compensation rate increased. The mod rate went up. I want to say it was 0.5 or something, and that totaled an additional $63,000. And we've had a lot of people slipping and falling on ice in the wintertime, and we're going to, or been asked to go to different trainings and to try to lower those rates and just be careful. But I think everybody's, from what I understand, a lot of people's worker comp rates have gone up over the last year or so. And the other major contributing factor is the decrease in the revenues, which is a direct result of us using less unassigned fund balance to offset taxes. State subsidy, the good news is that the subsidy will show that we have an increase, and that went up $371,191, as I mentioned before. This is all part of the essential programs and services model. There were some changes in that model, but again, this calculates a rate to use or to guide you when you're creating a budget, and then anything that's above what their recommendations are has to be is classified on the subsidy comparison report as amount above 100% EPS. So if you look about halfway down where it says 100% EPS on the subsidy comparison report, that's what the essential programs and services funding model indicates is the amount, and then anything that you have to raise above that is listed as amount above the 100% EPS. Some of the major contributing factors to the amounts over EPS: athletics co-curricular, teacher retirements, that's the 371, 191 I just talked about. Substitute pay, there's only a certain amount that's budgeted, and then if you have any, I think there's 1 day per student, and then nutrition is not included in the EPS formula. Total local funding is the amount that has to be raised locally, and the current amount is $7,023,783, which again is a 7.6% increase. Capital reserve, we did include capital reserve in this budget. That was created in 2012, and the intent is to be able to fund maintenance of plant and minor remodeling. As of today, the balance that's in there is $10,043. And as I mentioned before, the school committee has an action item on their agenda to do a transfer at their next meeting on Monday. And then school budget has built in the use of the $39,768, which usually covers the differences in some of our lease purchase agreements. We also had a decrease in our debt service, and so we use those. We generally try to use those funds to offset other projects.
Bless you.
The unassigned amount, again, this year is $194,270, and that is again $209,451 less than last year. And the unassigned account is at the end of the year, any unanticipated revenues, funding, or anything, any money that's left over from your budget gets put into the unassigned account, and then that's what we've historically used to help start or build a budget. But last year we used $403,000, and this year we don't have that kind of money in there, so that's kind of the double-edged sword whenever you use unassigned account or funds to build a budget or revenues to build a budget. If they don't come in the following year, then you have to raise or make cuts. The variables that are remaining is obviously the capital reserve, any unassigned or any unanticipated revenues. The Gartley Street School revenues are one area that we're looking at to see what those come in. We did increase and you look at the very top, it's under anticipated revenue. We did increase the revenues from the special purpose school, which is the Gartley Street School. We increased those from 79 to 91. The year before, we actually we had done or we had anticipated 130-something thousand. So those numbers haven't quite reached that amount yet, but we did build in additional $12,000 to help offset the budget for next year. The Regional Service Center, I mentioned earlier, that is a new requirement. The state is going to withhold funds from different school systems. You'll probably, I think if you read the paper this morning, I saw an article, I think Brunswick was, the counselors were talking about the fact that these funds were potentially being withheld. What happens is they're going to withhold a certain amount per student for any school systems that are not part of these service centers. Right now, we are one of, I want to say there are 16 or 18 systems that actually put in for a first application. Might have been 20. I think there's 12 that have been approved so far. We're actually, our second phase, second part or application has been turned in. We've been working with RSU4, and what we're talking about doing is working with our day treatment programs and having their students come here, and it'll save our taxpayers, or it'll help us because it'll bring in revenue, and it'll help them because they're going to be spending less money to send their students here because of transportation and the distance and all that stuff. So it's pending DOE approval, and then this year they have a certain amount that they're going to withhold per student, and then it almost doubles or triples the following year. So it's to our advantage to participate in this. There's a lot of controversy about the fact that you have to have an interlocal agreement that cannot be allegedly broken. However, the language in the law is being interpreted by different attorneys, and so systems are creating interlocal agreements. And we feel that RSU4 and us are going to do this anyway. So the interlocal agreement is one thing. There's language that you can add to an interlocal agreement that'll help systems if they ever wanted to withdraw, which the state is, like I said, the state has approved some of those applications. So we're hoping to, once we get through RSU4, their board approving this process, then we would we'd have to get voter approval. The school committee would formally have to vote on it. So it would have to go to referendum because of because we're a municipality. But long term, I don't think this is going away. You can read all you want about a lot of schools and stuff asking their legislators to change the law, but I don't think this is going to go away. And it is kind of what people refer to as it's a consolidation, but we're going to do the work with RSU4 anyway. So all it will do if our center isn't approved, we'll be raising the revenues. We'll be receiving the additional revenues from RSU4 to cover the penalty. and they'll be saving money and out of district to cover the penalty, but it makes more sense for us to go through the process. So we at some point, we're going to have to educate the voters. It does take away a little bit of your local control. That's what most people are afraid of, and I think in Lewiston, they just voted it down, their service center, because they had too many questions about different pieces. So anyway, that's the biggest variable that we have out there, but we are fortunate enough to have put in both applications, and the working relationship between RSU4 and Lisbon has been very strong over the last several months. So we've been able to share some resources and do a lot of athletic cohorts with some of their teams, which have allowed their students to participate in sports and allowed our kids to participate in things. Other variables, resignations. Anytime we have resignations, if we can restructure, we do that. Unanticipated revenue, sometimes there's funds that come in, depending on, like I said, Gartley Street School, I'm not sure what we'll have for any additional funds, but you never know. Sometimes we could have 4 students or 5 students register tomorrow, or not transfer in, but for the day treatment program, which would bring in revenue between now and the end of the year. And again, the unassigned amount and the fund balance, whatever, when the audit's done, how much funds are actually available. So ultimately, just to summarize the budget before I take any questions, this budget has a increase to the taxes of $493,786, which is about a 7% increase from last year. I have that here on another slide. 7.5% increase, sorry.
Questions? I got a couple. Just kind of going over everything, and you had mentioned the Gartley Street School, 79,000 was the, I guess, the number that we put on, but you're not sure how close we're going to land to that. Safe bet to say that we'll be at least in that ballpark.
Yeah, we have that. We've already received that amount. The problem is that we have a billing company, and they get a certain percentage of it. So although the more we generate, the more we have to pay out. So we're hoping to be able to go to a different billing company in the next couple of years. We're under contract with this one company, and they charge a certain percentage per whatever you take in for money. Okay. But yeah, we should be able to meet that. But we want to be somewhat conservative, because last time I built it, I think I put in 135, and we weren't even anywhere near that. That was the first year.
Right. Then the other side of that is, I know that the state has been looking to, and I'm not sure if the legislation passed already or not, that they were going to push the cost of supporting children aged 3 through 5 to the local, whereas they're handling it now. That's not included in this budget, but that is on the horizon, is it not?
Well, if you ask me, I think that I think that's a long ways away, because for them to bring in students, to bring in those CDS kids, the cost to send them to a system that has collective bargaining agreements and different things, the cost is pretty astronomical compared to what they're paying now.
Right.
Although I would prefer it. I would prefer to have those kids and work with them ourselves, but the problem is that there's been little or no communication. There was a committee that was basically, they had 2 or 3 meetings, and they haven't met since. They were, I don't know if disbanded is the word, but they're no longer meeting. I think they just realized just how expensive it would be to have those students move to school systems. Plus, a lot of systems don't have space to house the kids. We would be able to find room for them, but right. we're fortunate. But there's been nothing new, and I have people who were on that committee, and they don't think that it's going to go much further.
Good.
Yeah, it could, but
no, that's great. Answered my questions. Thank you.
Yep. Is there any pending vote at state level that's going to change this budget up or lower? I mean, is there anything?
You mean
pending?
legislation?
Yeah.
There's some legislation out there, but they've tabled quite a few of the items.
So is there
That's
some,
where people, the next few weeks, probably as these go forward, you're probably going to hear more and more about communities realizing about the penalties for the service center piece.
yeah. And next question on service center, once we actually make that agreement, is there anything, you say lack of control in a sense? I heard you say that.
Local control, it just, whenever you get into an interlocal agreement, it kind of it creates a separate committee. The whole language creates a separate committee. It's a whole nother layer of really administration, to be honest with you. So what they're trying to eliminate is they're actually adding, I feel. So there's another committee that's responsible for the service center. So I think that's, that would be a concern. RSU4 already has interlocal agreements, and I know talking to the superintendent that's going to be a tough sell for certain members in different towns on that board, that they would want to sign anything that takes away their control, because it does state that the only way you can revoke it is by the commissioner's approval. And so that's what's keeping a lot of people away.
Is there anything to say that once the state actually, forces the hand by penalizing, right? I mean, that's how they make people get things done, that they don't actually just combine those areas to have agreements saying they get to combine administrations? I mean, is that?
It's not so much focused. Yeah. Well, it was broad. To be honest, it was really focused on superintendents when you first started.
Well, that's what I'm
and then when they figured out that you take everyone's salaries or whatever and you put it in the grand scheme of the budget, and it's a fraction of a fraction of a percent or whatever. And then it became administration central office. But the service centers, you have like different. You have to apply and be part of different pieces, and you have to fulfill at least 2 of those requirements. But as far as them forcing it, they only had 20 applications, I believe.
I'm just wondering what their end game is. I mean, the penalization is actually driving people down that road, and there has to be some type of gain at the end of this process to equal the penalties, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what the end game is, to be honest. I just know that we're fortunate enough that we're doing something with a regional.
Proactive, yeah.
There's a lot of things. I mean, the new superintendent, RSG4, and I have worked great together over the last year. And I think that other systems that are that close should be able to look at things like that too. So.
Then my last question is the local increase of 488.57 one. Even if we had this discussion back when you first presented the budget to us, and which I think is just really important to note that if you did nothing in this year's budget, I mean actually just try to go on the same path you were last year, just the uncontrollable costs were pretty much $455,000. Is that still
with the salaries and stuff that we had budgeted? Yeah, it's definitely it's.
And moving forward as years go on, I mean, we basically look at that number as another number next year that really isn't going to change, if not go higher. So next year, even though if we kept next year's budget the same, we're still going to be looking at that $455,000 of uncontrollable costs as even the low side. So it's just important people to know that these budgets don't remain the same, that on the municipal side and the school side, every year there's an uncontrollable increase that really is not, unless you actually, the only way to stabilize that is to continually cut every year, which eventually you would have nothing to cut. So.
Right, and you have to remember that our insurance came in at less than 1%. So that's.
Yeah.
You're fortunate. I know it's every other year that you get that type of benefit.
I thought it was going to be the high.
It's coming next year, right?
Yeah,
I just wanted to touch base that the superintendent and I and the superintendent over at RSU4 and their board chair have met several times on the agreement, and that it will be extremely important for us to educate the community as to why it is important to do. But like the superintendent said, these are things that we're doing anyway. We belong to a cohort, Western Maine collaborative group that is other areas too. I mean, superintendents across the state belong to these things to try to cut costs. And for us, it made sense to investigate it to be able to avoid the penalties. This year, it's not such a harsh penalty, but hearing what they have predicted down the road in year 2, in year 3, they are harsh penalties, which I don't believe our town could afford to bridge that gap. And if it's something that we're doing anyway, we felt that it was important to investigate that. But as Superintendent Green said, the RSU 4 has other agreements that may or may not have gone so well. So that may be a harder sell over there. But I do believe that with the properly written language, that the penalty, if we were ever to get to a point where we needed to, break apart that agreement, I have faith that that would be written intelligently enough that we would be able to do so without too much harm.
Is that the only school district that is an option for us? I mean, you make it sound like
Well,
it's
we've
either
talked
this
about-
one or we pay penalties. There's no
Well,
other.
you've talked. There's other centers that have approached us, but not ones that make sense, in my opinion, for what they wanted to do.
It depends what the penalty is, right?
Well, the application's already passed.
And the
application process is already passed. So anybody who didn't put in an initial application, that's who you're probably going to hear about. Because a lot of people in certain regions of the state were convinced that there was some legislation that was going to go through that was going to take this all away.
It didn't happen.
And that hasn't happened.
So it's in years past, the word donut hole was actually the term that we kind of got caught
We're
in.
still
right?
designated the donut hole.
It's going to cost people a lot of money to be a donut hole in a sense as time goes on. If you're
It
not
could.
actually playing with other people around, you're going to be penalized,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, in
With
that
this
whole
language.
consolidation process, there was penalties tied to it as well too, and they wound up doing away with them. I mean, that is a possibility, but at the end of the day, even if they did get rid of them, we're still going to do it, so it doesn't really make a difference.
Gotcha.
And just to be clear, by becoming a donut hole, Lisbon saved a lot of money. By joining any of the other systems, it would have cost Lisbon up in the excess of
Left to
millions
right,
of
it's a
dollars
minimum
more.
of $1 million.
That's why you've had so many RSUs that have broken up, because these communities feel that they could pay less when they withdraw. But
And we never
once
got
you're
the
in,
penalties because it never
yeah.
went through.
For the soundbite for the listening public in the corner, I guess. This is a budget that was no cut in services or programs. It
No,
was
this
maintaining what is currently
maintains-
out there,
Maintains everything and then keeps and then adds a halftime maintenance position.
which is what you clearly presented before.
Yep.
Any other questions of Rick? Anybody?
So pretty much any of the increases are salaries, benefits, insurance.
Salaries, benefits, the workers' comp hurt this year, but I can break it all down. But the amount is, like as was just mentioned, the amount is, our operations are, without touching anything, are roughly a little over $400,000 a year. And that's all those are, it's 70, whatever if you have the pie chart that Haley made for you the first meeting, you'll see that it'll give you the percentage of those salaries and benefits and stuff.
I do want to just for the listening public as well. I know that was part of that increase that was mentioned was also extracurriculars, because the state only covers 20%. Was that right? Yeah. So in speaking with that, I know that when you guys walked through your vetting process, you looked at the club, the participation levels, and then made decisions about that as well too. So that way, if somebody has a question about that in the listening public, they understand that it wasn't just 4 kids on the chess club. That things had a criteria that you guys were holding.
One of the other things I just want to make a reference to, too, is there was a lot of discussion regarding adding an additional SRO officer because we had to have, by the timelines and for the vote in June, we did not, there was a lot of conversations held between the chief and the superintendent regarding possibilities of changes or other avenues or other ways of trying to think outside the box. Some of them were contractually not able to happen. So we did not put in a second because we did not feel we could afford to hold the full salary of such a position. And knowing that tonight you are just hearing the presentation from the police department, but we had to vote on a bottom line. So we also know that if through conversations or whatever the presentation is tonight, that you would entertain that as an option to add back in, that those discussions could be held as well, because at the end of the day, you do have control over the number. So if that is something that I, again, don't know what the presentation is tonight with the police department, and it may be that isn't a option, but it wasn't an option for us to pay the full amount either. for 175 days, so.
Being a public hearing, anybody else want to speak or add anything else associated with this? Again, I'm seeing no movement in the room. Let's go to the next item if there's no other questions, Twilight.
Is the public hearing for the school capital improvement budget?
I apologize, but I didn't have this on my agenda for this evening, and then normally I would have Alan come in to talk. I think you have a copy of our plan, but we adopted so much earlier that, is there anything?
We've seen it. We saw it with the presentation that we got from Lydia. There was both yours and the water department's included in that. I guess if anybody had questions of Rick, let's phrase it that way. Does anybody have questions of the school capital improvement plan from the information we've been provided?
The one thing I can tell you, that there have been a couple of changes. Obviously, the security cameras at the middle school, and then now more recently at the high school have been upgraded. Those are two things that have happened, and of course the phase 2 renovations have started.
I see no concern associated with that being on your agenda or not, sir. The fact is we have it. It was part of what we actually saw when we did the capital improvement. So unless there was a question that came from it, I consider that that agenda item is sufficient. Next item.
Is the police department budget?
Thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Rick. Thank you, Tracy. All you guys.
Good evening.
Chief.
Question we've typically started with, Chief, is why don't you briefly go over your goals?
All right, we can do that. So the goals for the department include increased community outreach, and that's pretty much been a piece for us since I started here about 20 months ago. I'll just go down through them all, I guess, and we can talk about them more specifically after if you'd like. We also have another goal is increased directed enforcement activity. The basics behind that is every week right now we have the supervisors and or the officers picking a new area in town or a different activity to direct more enforcement towards. We're going to increase direct supervision and leadership of our officers, and we also have decreased level of liability and risk to the town of Lisbon and the police department and its officers. Basically, we're going to address that through training and direct supervision, increased training and increased direct supervision. And I'll probably talk about that ad nauseum tonight till you're sick of hearing it, but the reason behind that is there's two reasons usually that a police officer or police department gets sued. One is lack of training, the other is lack of direct supervision. So that's we generally go with a risk management approach, or at least I generally go with a risk management approach, which is look for problems lying in wait and try to address them before it happens. And those are two of our big areas. So that's the reason behind that. And then increased cross-training. We have a little bit of an issue that we've been addressing, but we're not where I want to be, where we're a little too dependent on individuals. And what I'd like to get to is the point where we're capable of anybody stepping into anybody's role in the department. And we're not there yet, but we're headed that way. And that includes everything from budget to payroll to IT, cruiser maintenance. We're cross-training, and we've been cross-training. It's taking a little longer than I had hoped, but we're headed that way. So hopefully by the end of this budget year, we'll be there. The upcoming budget year, I should say. So, and increased training opportunities. And when I talk about that, it's a little different than what I've already mentioned. I'm talking more about for our personnel. This year, with our annual reviews, we went more in depth into asking a lot more questions of our personnel as far as where are you in your career? What are you looking for in your future career? How can we mesh that with the goals of our department? And maybe we can make them work a little better together so that we can keep our personnel a little longer, keep them happier. Happier personnel tend to stay somewhere a little longer, which I'm a little tired of going through personnel interview boards, that's for sure. So if we can keep our people happy and keep them here, we got a good crew, and I'd like to keep it that way. So in general, those, in a nutshell, those are our goals. Last one that I actually did have here was for 5-year goals. We're going to keep moving towards our 5-year goals, but that's a little down the road. So I can go back over each one, or we can leave it at that, or you can ask me questions, whatever you folks want to do.
The question within a question, to put it back to tonight, is does your budget reflect the goals that you've actually just tried to outline for us?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That said, you have the floor. Why don't you start wherever you see fit, and we'll chime in from there.
Okay, well, then if I have the floor, I guess I'll start with our 3 larger budget requests. And I'll go over all 3 of those with you rather than wait to hit them in each department. The first one is we are looking to have a civilian IT or information technology position added to our budget this year. This will be just a part-time position. I believe everybody, well, I believe all of you know that right now we have one of our patrol sergeants taking care of our IT needs. And I think that we are doing a disservice to this agency and the town, to be honest with you. And I also think it's a liability issue for us to be conducting business this way. You know, we have put in the last 20 months a big effort towards having our supervisors have more direct leadership and be more directly involved and out on the road with the officers. And we have a sergeant that, through no fault of his own, has been given the IT position. And it takes a considerable amount of his time off the road. Again, I've set up various administrative directives that I expect the supervisors to follow, and more than once he has said that he can't meet these directives because of his work on the IT needs. And again, I think it's creating a liability issue if he's correct and he can't address the issues that we have going on the road. You know, I've already told you there's 2 reasons police departments and towns get sued. One of them's lack of direct supervision. So I think we have an issue with having somebody who's supposed to be a patrol sergeant in the station doing IT, focusing on IT duties as well as communications duties. And I'll go back, you've probably all heard this from me before, but there was a staffing assessment done in 2015 by the town government at that time that suggested that the town get the police department out of the IT business. So looked at the costs. That particular supervisor gets an IT stipend without going full into it unless you have questions about it. We've looked at the removal of that stipend and what the amount of money is the town would save. We've looked at the cost of bringing somebody in on a part-time basis to address our IT needs. And at the end of the day, between the savings and the cost of bringing somebody in, we think there will be an additional cost to the town anywhere between $1,600 and nearly $4,000 annually. So for that cost, I think the benefits of the increased supervision, increased patrol output, decreased liability to the town, I think it makes this a financial aspect that we should be addressing.
So what was that number again?
16 to 4,000
a year?
Yes, sir.
But that's actually over and beyond, because that salary, that the position that's already there is still going to maintain a position, so that's actually just an excess.
Yeah.
If you would have, I guess if you would have put a number right now, what you're actually costing you a year for IT, I mean, that number would be well above that, and your number would be in the 30 to 40,000 range. I mean, I just, if right now for what the town is actually spending for hours per week or per month, actually on the IT, I mean, the number would be quite a bit higher than that if you were to quantify what it costs us to do our IT a year, right?
Yeah, and to be honest, this is the way we came up with that number. If you take his stipend away, which is an hourly stipend,
Yep.
if you look at the overtime that he worked this year, partially due to direct due to IT duties, and then just the rest of the overtime, because whether he's working IT-related overtime or patrol-related overtime,
Yep.
he's still getting that stipend. So you take that away. I've been in talks with one person that I know of in the area that can do the IT duties that the sergeant takes care of right now. Talked to him about an estimated cost and had him look at our system and think, or give me a rough estimate about what he thinks would be required every week. And we figured that out for a year. And, you know, that's why we're in a window, because,
Yeah.
again, somebody who hasn't worked on our system, there could be little glitches, it could be higher or lower, but that's where we get that number from.
And that number is at 4,000.
Yeah, it could be anywhere from 1681 to 3931 in additional expense. And again, I realize it's numbers, and I realize everybody's been up here in front of you talking about numbers and so forth. From my perspective, for what we get, the increases we get as far as patrol and supervision, and what we decrease,
Yeah.
I think it's worth it. Obviously, or I wouldn't be up here in front of you.
I guess the question, can we ask questions as we go?
No, by all means, because I was going to go right to Mr. Albert
Exactly.
associated with the topic.
If we would actually have a full-time IT person on staff, would it take them very long to get up to speed on what needs to be done over there? You mentioned the idea of there may be a kind of a backdraft or a hole there from loss of information or expertise on the system. Is that something easily learned with an IT person that is an IT person, or?
My very uninformed IT brain will tell you this. The person that I spoke to about taking over our system on a part-time basis stated that he wasn't looking for extra work. He said he would do this to help me out, and his theory was within a year to a year and a half, he could get our own staff trained up on the IT duties so that we wouldn't need him. So I guess short answer is yes, somebody should be able to pick that up.
Just more of a broader discussion that seems to be coming up. So.
I've been over here, my chops, and my drool, and I really want to get on this. So to go to what you just said and to complement what you're talking about with your 20-month effort so far to have cross-training with your officers, I see no real good reason why this wouldn't be a short-term piece. It would just be if we were to bring in a IT person to handle our town side of the house on the stuff that we want them to take care of, they could have this as one of their projects to get IT in the police department up to speed, and then cross-train officers and be a resource for them as additional things happen, whether it's systems upgrades so that require additional training. So these are all things that we could do in-house at a cost savings, and it actually better prepares us because we don't just have one person who's the keeper of the keys, and if they go down, all of a sudden we're in a tailspin. So it's just, it makes sense. It's smart business, and in the long term, it's going to save us money, and we're going to get more efficiencies, not only from the police department side, like you said, getting more of that leadership out in the field, and reducing liability, but getting more efficiencies on the town side, administration side of the house, too, and knowing that the folks who sit in their offices don't have to worry about trying to strap on an IT hat for 2 hours or maybe 5 hours out of the day when it's not their traditional role. Somebody could just come in and gather facts and saying, oh, I'm going to pick on Lydia because it's easy. Lydia, here's the finance pieces that I need to go and get questions answered from whoever it is we're dealing with on software. Can you tell me this, this, and this? So she could provide that, but she doesn't have to get in the weeds on the IT language, or she doesn't know the right questions to ask of no fault of her own. So this is where I think we're going to benefit, and the fact that the police department needs are there as well. It's one more area we can look at after this and talk about how maybe we can incorporate that.
Chief, the question I have on this is, in Lewiston, you have to have a sign-off to actually be able to work on IT hardware within the department. Is that something we would have to go to, or could we went with a full-time IT person? Is in Lisbon IT on the town side any different than IT on the police department side, for instance?
Yeah, we would just have to do a background check on them for them to get access to some of our equipment that allows them to get into the state database. Everybody has to pass a background check.
Just the same as any other employee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's the reason I was just asking that question, just to even be able to consider, because it's an opportunity on us to be able to consider putting an in-house staff to replace what we're outsourcing on the municipal side and addressing what you're experiencing on the communication side, putting it together to actually get the best bang for the buck. If I'm hearing the discussions that I know Councilor Albert has actually brought to us, I think it's an opportunity. And
Chief, the person you're talking about doing this role, is this a person who already has experience with the police comm center stuff, or is it a generic IT person like we're talking about here?
No, actually, it's a person that's been a Brunswick Police Department communications officer for,
got the know-how to
I'm
hold us.
thinking of almost 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, if we hired a generic person to cover both, they'd have to be trained and stuff in it to begin with. So, you're going to need this specialist for this transition at least, and then maybe like for next year's budget, you could have a full-time person cover that.
Or the other side of that is we could bring on an IT person right now and have them hire on Chief's friend as a consultant who can provide that. It's six one way, half dozen another.
Mm-hmm.
We can work out the details on what makes the most sense budget-wise. But I think that the fact that we're talking about it on a discussion that definitely we should be having.
The one piece that's involved here that, again, I'm by no means an IT expert, there's one piece which is our in-house system. It's called IMC to us, but our in-house system is the piece that not that many people have training on. So Brunswick happens to use the same in-house system that we do. That's why I reached out to that person. We've talked generically to the current IT company that the town has, and they don't have any, nor would they have any expertise in that right now.
Can I ask the figure of what we're expecting for that halftime position, just as a whole, just to be able to put two sides together?
Well, let's see. Rough cost, again, this is based on 2 hours to 3 hours a week, would be $8,100 to $10,350.
For a part-time position?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Which somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000 is already covered.
Yeah.
It tells you how much we're paying right now.
All right.
Roughly. I would expect that someone was not even be able to flinch at 30,000 plus benefits to get a part-time position in the door. That's what I was trying to come up with.
And I'll be honest with you, this is based on just showing somebody from another agency
Yeah.
we have.
Get us up to
explain them
speed to
what
be able
we do.
Yep.
And the way we came up with this number is he's like, maybe 2 weeks in here of full-time-ish, just trying to figure everything out and getting it up and running the way he's comfortable with. And then his thoughts were 2 to 3 hours, maybe a week, until he got somebody. His thought was in communications, because they're in the station all the time, up and running on the system. So
Sure.
we're not calling somebody in off the road.
Or two of them.
Yes, sir.
Part of an IT internally here that could actually just walk next door.
Well, that's the thing about IT redundancy. It's one thing that we don't have a ton of right now, especially when it comes to those backup pieces. So having that sort of redundancy, if we lose first chair and second chair, so to speak, there's still somebody there that can keep the lights on and keep things going.
But it's still an in-house resource on a police force that's understaffed from the survey that's actually been done 5 years ago now.
3 years,
3 years ago?
2015.
Yeah, try to remember the time frame. So we're still drawing from bringing staff up to speed, so we haven't gotten any greater efficiencies out of that at all. And I am not any slight. I agree with the program and what your intent associated with that, but you're still having to have it be done on an internal staff, which works against the community policing aspect of your goal that I just clearly heard from you.
Right. Well, no, I hear you. I'm just thinking the people that are out on patrol, I want them out on patrol versus somebody that's in the station that might have more time. They're in there.
Dispatch? Is that what?
That's what he's
Okay.
talking about, communication.
Right. No, that's not what I was hearing at all. Okay. They're replacing something else with another need associated with that. So somebody that's in here. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Next. That was one. That was a lengthy.
The second piece is I'm proposing that the Lisbon Police Department promote a communications officer to the position of communications supervisor. Again, I have a patrol sergeant that's in charge of the communications officers, which is 4 full-time and 6 part-time communications officers. So, he's responsible for, training, evaluating, determining productivity, workload, scheduling, as well as monitoring the quality control, which basically means listening to phone calls, listening to radio traffic, making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be. Again, it's taking him off patrol. I've said it to him blue in the face, and you're probably tired of hearing it. We have some staffing issues on the PD. So if I can get a patrol supervisor out on patrol and have somebody that's in the station in a supervisory role, to me it makes sense to do that and let communications officers handle communications and have a supervisor in there.
Do you have the capabilities of doing that in-house, or is that?
Yes, sir.
You do.
Yep.
Cost on that?
We would look at, we've reviewed basically communication supervisor pay in all the agencies around us. It would be about a 10% bump to one of their pay, depending on who received it. So it's an additional $4,804 cost to the town.
Well, the benefit is you get that because that's coming off the patrol person that now is dedicated to be able to doing something out in the field.
Exactly.
That communications officer that'd be bumped up to the supervisory role. All it is additional responsibilities and duties that would be then coming off that patrol officer, correct?
Yes, and it's a working supervisor, so they're still doing the communication duties. They just have some extra duties now. Third is I'm proposing as a Lisbon Police Department hire a 7th patrol officer position. Again, it's highlighting everything that I've been talking about. Right now, with 6 patrol officers, we have bare minimum coverage. Anytime somebody's out sick, anytime somebody's on vacation, anytime we have an injury, right now we have 2 injuries, we are running at overtime rates. And I could get into officer safety and talk about that as well. We have officers right now going to domestic issues, to shots fired, to suspicious persons. You name it, we have in the middle of the night, we have officers who've responded by themselves or calling for Sabattis or calling for Androscoggin sheriffs who aren't always available, or they're 10 to 15 minutes away. Speaking from somebody who's been on patrol and, in some type of physical fight with somebody, 30 seconds feels like 30 minutes, let alone waiting 5, 10, 15 minutes for somebody to get there. So from a safety perspective, I just think if we had I know that if we had another officer, we could get to the point where we'd have 2 officers per shift. So it brings up a safety, actually knocks off a safety issue that we have. We're getting continual calls for traffic safety enforcement. We've been trying to address it. We just don't always have the personnel. Again, you're not always going to have people that are out injured. You're not always going to be short-staffed. But it's been like that for over a year now. And, I've told you all before, we're working our way towards getting back up to staffing. But it would be better to have another officer. We get another officer, not only can we meet the minimum standards of having at least 2 officers on every shift, but we could actually find some time to start doing some more patrol coverage and getting out there and being proactive instead of reactive. And a few weeks ago kind of highlighted the issue here. Again, every week we're trying to get the supervisors to focus their officers on a new area. Ferry Road in particular, we've had some recent issues with. So we took 1 week and we were out there. Somebody was nice enough to put on Facebook on one of the community pages, "Oh, thanks, it's great to see the police out here." It was a nice positive comment, but it turned into 5, 6, 7 comments of, "Why are they on Ferry Road? They should be on High Street. Why are they there? They should be on Central Ave." Why, it turned this into this big negative.
Keep because 50 feet too. Let's keep going.
It ended up with all these negative comments about how we're not here, we're not there, we're not there. Every week we're changing. We're trying to meet everybody's needs, and right now, again, we're reactive. We're not proactive, and I've been talking about being proactive since I got here, but we're just having some issues getting there. And the 7th officer, between safety and actually starting to be a little more proactive, I think it's time to move up. I won't even beat you again with the staffing survey that said Actually, I guess I am. So it might have mentioned a little bit about having 14 sworn officers.
Where are we now? Where would this extra officer get us to, number-wise?
We are at 12.
And this would bring us to 13.
Yeah. I didn't want to be greedy and ask for both. Well, I did, but I didn't.
I will.
Thank you.
I'll make the unpopular question. Is one enough?
Not according to the
No.
survey,
Yeah.
right?
Survey says
No,
14.
He has touted the survey several times tonight.
He's not the
which
only
is
one.
Which is why I'm asking. Is this a step in the right direction, or is it the direction?
It's a step in the right direction.
So the answer is no, in what I'm hearing from you.
You are correct, sir.
Does 12 include reserves as well?
No, sir. We have 4 reserves right now. Reserves are great when we can get them in, to be honest with you. Reserves are kind of like volunteer firefighters or other per diem issues. Trying to get people these days that want to do this is hard enough to get. It's hard enough to try to get somebody to do it for full time with benefits. To get somebody to come in part time, for $16, $17 an hour with what a lot of officers are dealing with nowadays, it's difficult. And then you got people's personal time. It's just we're having issues getting people in. To be honest with you, I'll give you a short answer. So no, we have 4 reserves right now, and we have 12 full time.
Let's put some perspective around this too. I know that Councilor Rochelle asked you what you're at right now, and you said 12. You're not at 12. You're at 10 because you're down 2 officers right now, aren't you?
Yeah, and a few weeks ago we were at 9, but we just recently hired somebody, and he'll be on field training for at least the next 2 months. We'll get him on the road roughly for about a month, and then he'll be in the academy for the next 4.5 months.
So realistically, before the new officer that we've just hired, we probably won't see that person in actually serving closer to the year mark before it's all said and done. Right?
February, March, maybe.
Yeah.
He'll graduate, barring any issues, the end of December. He'll have to do a little more field training, so we're looking at February, March before he's out there.
So we get that officer, and then if we go and we get 2 now proactively, that way if something else was to happen, such as another injury or someone leaves the force, we're not being reactive any longer. We're actually being proactive because we'll have the resources to not tax our officers by having them do too much overtime, creating liability issues, and other that you've already listed here.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it's all about tonight. That's what I'm going to keep hitting over and over again. And we do have an officer that could leave, retired any time, and we have one that could, leave within 11 months. So we're in a situation where we got to move now to keep up.
Those officers, I mean, we're talking about, and I don't know who, and I'm not putting any, but I'm just saying, anytime an officer leaves, whether by a choice to go and go somewhere else or because of something other than that, there's going to create a vacuum as far as the leadership piece, and you're going to have to get somebody who maybe is not seasoned in, which then requires everybody to kind of step up and pull weight in different areas.
Yeah, you're correct. It's tough to get somebody to leave another PD right now to go to another PD. And so we're pretty much taking people that are just out of college, if at a college, that we're trying to get trained up. So the vacuum of leadership and experience is painful to deal with sometimes.
And even if you take somebody new, for college, somebody out of college, it's a 10-month prospect before you maybe see them actually hit the ground.
Yeah, the police academy runs 2, one in August and then one in January. So you got to time it right to get somebody in there.
So it could be longer then, depending on where you hire your candidate.
Yep.
Okay.
Chief,
Thank you.
Yeah.
The difference in the wages from last year to this year, I mean, we look, what is, trying to decipher the idea, some of this may be just in the changes of other wages, but if you put a price tag on a individual officer, I mean, what is that dollar figure that you actually would calculate into your budget or figured in this one for one new officer?
That'll take me a minute.
Yeah, sure. Take
I
your
mean,
time.
I have that
roundabouts. I mean, I'm not looking for an exact figure.
You have the figure with benefits? 'Cause they're going to all blame you and say that retirement's all you anyways.
We'll do because we can do up to the 8-year slot.
Yep.
So that'd be the worst case scenario with benefits. It's $83,719.
Benefits included.
Benefits included.
For a person with no previous experience, what
And
would
you
the cost
started
be?
them out at the entry level at $69,845.
Okay.
So we really,
Most likely, that's where it would land unless you got somebody from another
But
department.
then you add, is it 4,500 for the cost of the academy if you can get that in? 2,500 if you
Well,
get the individual in?
25 to get them in, and then you got to pay.
Outfitting and paying.
Yeah, the uniforms and all that. That's another 3,000 right there. So
the figure is probably realistic then. You answered the question with indirect no. It isn't enough. It's a step in the right direction. But have we just complicated it to actually consider going from 1 to 2?
no, I'd love to deal with that complication. Thank you.
Okay. That's why I wanted to see where you wanted to land on that topic, because it's one thing to have a great idea and it's another thing to create a shit show for somebody else that has to get it going. And that's what I didn't want to actually have happen.
Diane, did the budget amount of the $40,000 for the motor vehicle, did we determine if we could or we can't use that towards that TIF money from Dingley? Would that be, could we earmark that for the upcoming year for the?
I can check on that for you.
That would make a significant difference if we were able to take that sheltered money of $40,000 out of this budget, and then that would actually, now we're halfway there without actually changing anything besides the idea of using money that would have came into our general fund anyways, but we're diverting it out of our general fund and using it as sheltered money. So we're actually, instead of getting 60 cents on a dollar, we're getting a full dollar's worth out of that, if that makes sense.
I think if we can, it's a prorated share. How you define that, I don't know, but I'll check into it.
Anything would be, it'd be nice to know. That's what we talked about in the last meeting of ways we could use it, and the idea of, extra, police capital as far as for
community
equipment. Yep.
Community.
Yep.
let me put this out there because I know it's going to be part of this discussion. So if we do consider 2 officers in the mix, are we then going to go ahead and look at how one of those officers could be utilized as the additional SRO that was mentioned but not necessarily acted upon by the school? And would we want to act on that right now? Or am I a little premature on that? Am I jumping the gun?
Chief is there. He's the one that could answer that question, or somewhat, maybe not. I don't know. But he'd have more tools in his toolbox to be able to do something with. Whether or not he could actually justify it, that'd be his question. Answer, I should say.
Yeah, the point of the question of the second school resource officer, it all depends on your perspective. I get the school's feeling of increasing safety. I don't disagree with that. My perspective, and I've told them this, so I don't mind saying it, is more of the whole community safety. And I think, our focus is patrol. That you will find a police department somewhere without a detective bureau or without a school safety officer, but you won't find a police department without patrol force out there meeting with the people. So I think we need to focus on the patrol first and then move on to the school safety. So, but I've told them that, and I wasn't against our discussions about the school resource officer. I'm just trying to meet our basic needs for the community first and SRO second.
No, thank you. I appreciate your candor because I think we all wanted to hear that, where we were going to land on that if we're looking at this, and it sounds to me like we are. So,
now, am I misunderstanding that there was, in the discussion associated with community policing, was the school receptive to setting up an office in that so somebody on patrol might be able to fill some of that need throughout the course of a day?
Oh,
I know
yes.
Lewiston does that kind of thing, and I know other communities do too. Is that the approach to an alternative?
Oh, that was one of, oops, sorry.
No, please, no,
No, at one point it was mentioned earlier that we talked about a number of ideas, and that was one of them, and they were more than receptive, and I was more than receptive to putting one in there during the day to do the reports if that was, an option.
So, fair assessment then, by considering this, we're addressing 2 topics. I don't care if you want to call it an SRO officer. You have a community resource officer that's actually focused on both, whether it be patrol within the community or within the school. There's greater presence because you've got greater tools in your toolbox to be able to address the needs.
Yep, it gives us a lot more opportunity and diversity, multifunction, if we have that. Yep.
police presence, I think, like you said.
Yeah.
We can put a SRO label or whatever we want on it, but I mean, I think ultimately police presence in the school helps send the message to anyone who would think twice about doing any sort of harm. So I think that would be the goal and the idea. Now, how that gets worked out, I'm sure there's a lot of good minds over there at the school committee, and it sounds to me like there's a willingness from your part to try to come up with a creative solution for that.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a great problem to have.
You've heard his key three. What be the wish or idea on IT? Let's start rolling through.
That's all you have, Mark, is them three?
Those are the big ones.
I mean, there's
Those are the ones you want to talk about?
Keep going.
There's
Keep going.
increases
You got a
throughout
great
the
list.
budget. Somebody mentioned cruisers. That's up to 40,000 this year. It was 35. Ford, now that they pretty much have the market, they decreased. They caught us by surprise, caught everybody by surprise last year, and took about 3,000 per car away in rebates. So that's why the cost has gone up on the cruisers. We have a request in here for firearms, and I'll give you the basics on that. I've asked for almost $8,000 to get 7 new firearms. We have rifles in every car. We have 7 of them, and they're anywhere from 3 to 8 years old. So last year we talk about training, we sent one of our personnel to a rifle instructor course, and a great deal of discussion was around Lisbon's rifles that we were using. We were the only ones that don't have what optics. Yeah, no, it wasn't quite the pound the bullet down in there, but we don't have optics or scope, for lack of a better term. A better term is optics, but just so everybody knows, on our weapons, it's just old iron sights, and nobody's using those anymore, and it caused a lot of discussion about the issues around not having a scope on there, basically. And it all comes down to liability, to be honest with you. Shot placement is so much better. If you're talking a rifle with iron sights, you've got to line them both up, hope your target's not moving, and that the person, whoever is on the other end, is not too stressed out to be firing straight. Well, to be honest with you, I'll stop right there. If we have to pull our rifles out, it's not going to be for somebody that's just stationary out in a field somewhere. It's going to be under stress. There's going to be a lot of activity around if it's an active shooter situation. We work a lot at night, as you all know, so optics help with low light situations. And basically with the optics, what I'm talking about is when you look through the scope, you see a red dot. It's not a matter of taking time to line up both sights and try to keep everything calm and under control. It's just a lot easier. It's more precision with any secondary shots that you have to take. I could go on and on about it. So what we did initially was we looked at just changing the weapons that we have and putting optics on them. Well, of course, nothing's as easy as it sounds. We would have to change the rifles around as far as the way they're mounted. We'd have to get all new pieces for the weapons. So if we wanted to just upgrade the current rifles that we have, it'd be $7,491. If we trade in those 7 rifles and get brand new rifles, it's $7,716. So for $225, we can get 7 brand new rifles with optics, with everything that we would need. It seemed like a bit of a no-brainer to me anyways, which is why it's in here. So that's one of the requests under equipment.
That's not currently in your budget. I took that out, and it's on the undesignated fund list.
Sorry, I just wasted 5 minutes of your time talking about it.
No, because it will come up as another discussion.
It's a very good discussion. We all know what, there was a need. There was a need. We talked about it.
But it's a
Good.
one-time
So you're going to take it out of
purchase.
general fund. That's
That's
fine.
right.
No, makes sense. Makes sense.
Well,
Is an item like that typically on your capital improvement plan? I mean, do you consider that as part of your equipment updating every so year? It kind of sounds like it's been off the radar, that's all, but.
Yeah, yes, it would typically be if I wasn't just 20 months into it. Bad on me, I've been dealing with other issues and I hadn't got to
That's
this
something that
issue yet.
won't just come up to the point where we realize when you pull it out someday that you don't have.
No,
It's
no,
something that will be addressed as time
Yes.
moves on. Gotcha.
Other than that, I think those are the big issues. Everything else is just, a little extra money here, a little extra money there because the price of everything is going up.
Can you talk to me about school miscellaneous details? That line item sends at $7,000 next year, and it's a reduction from where you are year to date in your expenditures.
Details, that is for the school to reimburse us for details we pay out.
Yep.
School reimburses us for overtime details, or any other agency entity, I should say, that wanted to have an officer for an extra detail. We just haven't used as much as we put in there last year when we added it used to say just school resource or school details. Last year we added the external entities because we had been asked by a few different companies about hiring us for details. So extra money was put in, and it just hasn't come to fruition where anybody was asking for the money. Anybody was asking for us to work.
The action item that we just worked on last council meeting, does that reflect we're living with the $7,000, or should that figure be adjusted?
No.
That's
Doesn't
internal.
include the school.
Yeah.
That other action item.
No.
Remember, we were leaving
Okay,
anything
so
to
those
do with
special
municipal and
details for
school
hire.
separate, different. Leave it the same rate right now. It's the outside details
Third party
and the
type.
grant stuff.
Okay, so this miscellaneous detail is not that item.
Right. It's not.
Okay.
The overtime number, if we were to float 2, is that going to decrease?
In theory,
Yeah, in theory. Theory.
I should tell you, we at least went down in printing this year. We added 2,400 last year for police trading cards. Everybody knows them as cop cards. We're getting those printed up here, hopefully within the next month or so. So that was taken out.
If you do want to add another patrol position, we would need to really look at this too, because that figure that I gave you doesn't take into consideration if there's any contractual overtime per the contract. I don't know if that overtime would change or not. Do you know, Chief?
I'm sorry, I was looking ahead. Can I hear the question again?
The overtime, if we add another additional person, would it change that overtime based on the contract, collective bargaining contract? That's something we would need to look at.
Yeah, we would need to look at that. I'm almost thinking it's a wash because
Okay.
we're going to have less, again, in theory, overtime if we've got extra personnel on board. So
I would think that that number would be reduced substantially, but again, that's only in theory, as you said, but.
Right, nobody else gets hurt, nobody else retires, nobody else.
Exactly, yeah.
So if we took a conservative approach and just half that number, and I think that's maybe even be a little too aggressive, but just if you take that down half, then. But you're talking about if there's some contractual obligations, it could just be a wash, is what I'm hearing. Is that right to assume?
Take the overtime down by half, you mean? Is that
Yeah,
what
I'm
you're
not saying we do that right now. I'm just saying in theory, if we were, we're floating the idea of 2 as opposed to the 1 that the chief's asking for, would it be safe then to conservatively say cut that number in half?
I would say not for this year, because didn't you say it's going to be,
That's-
it takes a long time?
Oh, yeah.
January at
I was
least.
about to throw out the caveat that it would depend on how quickly we could get somebody on board.
And I'm not saying that we would make that move and cut that number this year for that exact reason that you pointed out, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. But I was thinking more of looking ahead to the future. So this time next year, we'll be looking at a number that
We'd
looks
have a better
significantly
idea.
different in the
Yeah.
overtime column.
And
if
we're
we're
also
going to
look-
make this sort of move.
We're also looking at 2 potential retirements in the
Yeah.
next year, right?
Right.
Potentially.
So that still puts us at the number that we're at
Right now.
today. In theory, if we,
Right.
12,
We had
with-
all
but we
healthy
would be
people.
moving towards possibly, doing something different.
May I?
Please.
Chief, the in the wages, and I'm not sure how that's broken down, but you mentioned the idea that you actually have reserves, that you have X amount probably figured for reserves, and sometimes you have a hard time getting reserves in. Can you actually, is there an amount that you can look at saying that, we budgeted 30,000 for reserves and we've only used 15 of it this year? I mean, is there a reduction there, or because of the lack of people that you're still up and on your number where you would typically be for reserves? Is that fair?
Well, reserves fall under the temporary, which
Okay.
is account 5112. So we did increase that from last year. Last year we had 22,000. This year we put it up to 25. What we've been doing, to be honest with you, just to explain that, is we've been trying to bring some reserves in during the week just to get a little proactive enforcement out there. So we've been bringing them in. The union is not happy about it, but begrudgingly haven't filed a grievance yet, so we've only done it sparingly just because their concern is we're trying to avoid paying them extra to bring in reserves. We've just been trying to move our temporary reserves around a little bit to increase what the community sees for enforcement out here. So, the reserves work 4 8-hour well, we try to schedule 4 8-hour shifts for reserves. We try to schedule an 8-hour shift Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday during the day. Those are generally times when we try to get a reserve in to supplement. So, if we were able to get up to that, or if you're asking me if we could limit.
Well, that was the
start cutting
question,
back.
is the idea if we actually do get 2 more patrol officers, would you scale that number back to even
Yes.
maybe lower than last year, or would it
Yes.
be, so you could even go to like a $20,000 figure? I'm just looking for dollar
Yeah.
figures, so.
No, we could, again, this year, depending on how quickly we could hire people, maybe not, depending on how quick this process could happen, but definitely in the future.
And I think some of the discussion we're having tonight isn't what's happening this year, it's how we're setting ourselves up for next year. But
Yeah, which is great, though.
but-
I mean, we've got to be, that's why we're thinking 5 years down the road right now, just it's going to be here before we know it.
I float the lead balloon. The fact is, do you have cushion in all in this budget to actually get ahead of that? To actually, if we go forward with the idea of 2 police officers, can we bring them on before the July 1st where this kicks in?
I would have to.
I know you guys are going to have the number crunch and get back
Yeah,
too,
that
but
would-
that's where I'm living, hearing everything you're presenting at this point in time. If it matters and you need to get somebody into staffing, and if we're receptive to the idea, giving you the tools to be able to do it, so we're not just sitting and waiting to be able to get the benefit for what we're talking about here tonight.
To be honest with you, as I think about the date, we're into the second week of May. To run an ad, to do interviews, if we like 1 or 2 people to then do backgrounds on them, we're probably talking July 1st anyway.
So it's still not going to benefit you.
Right.
Yeah. Which,
I mean, it'd be
to
great
me, it's
to
not
get-
a short term.
But at least it puts it on the faster track.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, it'd be great to be able to go to ad if we knew this was going to happen. Even for just one, it'd be great to be able to go to ad with the belief that there'd be an opening at that time. And, you can word the ad, that's not an issue, so that we wouldn't be in any kind of legal issues. But it would be great to hit the ground running if we were to do that. Right now, I have 2 slots reserved just in case that I did back in January for the August Academy. So if it came down to that, this is the only way I could get a second person in, is if we hit the ground running next week or sometime very soon.
That's
Is there anyone here who doesn't support adding at least the 1 officer?
I'm in favor of both.
Yeah, but I mean, he needs to know at least now for 1.
Yeah.
We can have a discussion on both next week or something, but at least if we get
How
one,
many
he can
people
say,
are in favor of 2? You already threw it out
Yeah,
there, right?
I think that's something we'd actually,
I'm at 2.
I mean, I'm not sure why we would actually, I'm not sure, do we have another opportunity to discuss this at a later date? I mean, if we're.
We're discussing it right now. We're here right now. There's 7 of us.
I mean, with what I've been told and the possibilities of what we're going to be replacing down the road, and knowing how hard it is to find police officers. I mean, as mentioned, Chief, one day I seen that Lawson had hired an officer with a full-time job of actually just recruiting new officers on social media. It kind of led me to the idea that when you start hiring a full-time salesperson for officers means that probably having a hard time getting them, and when you start seeing sign-on bonuses for police officers, and so, I mean, if we can get them and treat them correctly, maybe they won't just go away, but.
I just look at the study. The study came out, we spent a lot of money as a community on that study, and it point blank said that we needed 14. We've been staffed at 12 consistently, and right now, due to injury, we're at 10, and in some cases slipping down to 9. So, and then there's a potential of 2 folks leaving. So if we went and had those folks leave in the next 12 months, then we're down to 10 all the time, because we're going to have to replace those 2 with 2 green folks, get them up to speed. So it's knee-jerk. We can choose to do it now and get ahead of it while we have an opportunity, or we can choose to do it later when it's squeezing us because we're grossly understaffed. But the one thing that Chief mentioned that resonates with me anyway is the risk management. We're doing it from a place, even though we're we have a very thin safety net right now. If we wait couple months, 11 months, 12 months down the road, and have a situation that's super volatile, and we're completely running on a shoestring force, more bad things could happen, and it's a public safety thing. So
I don't think you have to preach to anybody to your left. I think the people to your left, I think you have enough numbers here. If you really want
I
to
have
take
a question for you, Chief.
I want to take a straw poll. I think you got enough
Maybe
here.
a stupid question, but can you take any of the resource officers and move them up to one of those full-time positions?
Or one of the reserve officers? I'm sorry. I don't know if there's interest, to be honest with you. I could obviously ask. 2 of them are full-time officers with another area agency. I would think that if they wanted to jump, they would have by now, because we've had ads in the past when they've been here and they haven't done so.
I'm just
Obviously
figuring
never-
if they're already on the books.
Yeah, and we've
employed
already
here,
checked their backgrounds. No, it's definitely an option that's out there. I will also throw out, you folks know that if you look on Facebook or in the papers, but it is graduation time, so timing's everything in life, and there's a lot of people graduating from not just law enforcement or criminal justice, but any college that, we don't look just at criminal justice colleges when we're out recruiting. We just want to see that somebody's got a degree, and as somebody's put forth the effort towards a goal, it's not necessarily about criminal justice. So now would be a good time to be looking.
I mean, if you want to do a straw poll, that's fine. I mean, I think that's the direction we need to go. But I mean, as far as being money smart, I think we need to look at this too, and if we can actually, do something with the cruises as far as through that TIF to even if it's a part of that 40,000, and if we can look at the other numbers of the budget, which I think we'd actually have to direct Chief to go back and look and see as far as the overtime, how that'd be affected in the temporary wages. Some of those we know are not going to be immediate, but I mean, it has to be somewhere towards the end of that budget that starts kicking in a little bit. And, if doing this, where, a year or 2 out, where that would actually save us money also. To me, it's one of those things where you just got to look kind of what the numbers you have and see how you can make them work, but knowing there's going to be an extra cost on top of the budget. I mean, to me, I think we, there was a $25,000 study that I think we paid to actually get the information that we haven't been following, so I think we need to do it.
I would make the recommendation that we empower Chief and Diane to go back and reflect this budget to include 2 officers full-time. And secondly, if he needs authorization from us to be able to go out to an ad and have it be on next week's agenda, does he need that?
No.
Then he is empowered to do so.
We'll advertise and.
He is empowered to do so.
I thought we were just going with one officer.
The question was 1.
Right, the one you can advertise for 1, and I mean it's an ad, so you always hire 2 if the council decides to go that way. But you're out there with an ad for a police officer.
I am advocating right here 2.
I think we need more discussion before we decide on 2. I'm not ready to support 2 yet.
I mean,
I am.
I think that's a 7-person decision versus a 1.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you that it's not just a 1. I support the 2 as well.
That's, again, so I would ask the question, 1, show of hands, we're straw polling here.
For 1?
For 1.
You mean only one?
Yeah,
Or
only
at least
one. At least one.
At
At least one.
At least one,
All
yeah.
of us.
All of us,
I think
I
it's
would
all
say.
of us.
All of us,
Yeah, I think it's across
Now,
the
if you-
board.
if-
That's
two.
not
That
the
was
question.
easy.
I don't think one's the question. I
The
think
number
two
for me
is
is
where
two.
people are
The
having
number
some
for me is
heartburn.
two.
All right.
Two. Yeah,
Two.
I'm down with two.
I am too.
I'm not 100%.
Yeah.
Of course, we need some more numbers. There's no doubt about it. But
think
we're all talking about the timing and all that other stuff, and it's all kind of piling up. And once they get the numbers, I'm sure they're going to scramble about it in the next 7 days.
Yeah. Plus
So-
the potential
so-
retirements, like you guys have mentioned.
We're not talking about we're taking a vote tonight and this is how it's working. We're just telling you that.
Yeah, because technically it's a budget workshop, we
Right.
can't.
We
Can
can't.
we come
Right.
back with what it would look like with one and another with two?
This
Great
one
idea.
already
This one is
reflects
one.
This is the
Okay.
one.
Would
Comparison
add
side.
This
that.
one is one. Adding one
Add
more.
another one.
Having the
80,000.
two.
but
to use
Tracy, you
as
want to get up and say something?
Thank you, Chris. She was on my left.
I know
Here's
it.
the
I was looking at
beauty
you.
of this plan is that you are able to advertise for the one that the majority of you are looking like you're supporting.
Correct.
And karma is always a good thing as well. And if you're looking for one, it doesn't say that you don't have two strong candidates while you guys are trying to fish out the details of a possible second.
Absolutely.
So I think that is
How do you feel about it, Tracy?
with the craziness that happens in society nowadays, I would feel more comfortable with two.
There you go.
Thank you.
Mark, it's looking good for you. And the town of Lisbon.
You need to sell us, though. That's what you need to do.
That's
Next 7
right.
days,
Yeah. No, that's great. I appreciate it. Appreciate the support.
Any other discussion items on this division for chief? You want to flip the page to communications, I guess? Sorry, sir. Actually, animal control.
There's not much different along the lines of ACO this year. Costs of some things went up last year. Just prior to budget, we purchased some new tires, so we dropped money last year off the budget that we would be adding again this year, thinking at the end of next budget year we may need to purchase some. I'm looking, it looks like our animal control budget went up $3,979 in a lot of little spots. Nothing, there's nothing huge that we're asking for. We added a little more money in for our part-time ACO to be prepared for him just to work a little more when our full-time ACO is taking vacation. So,
You just answered my question. If you, with that statement, the 1.5% on that was more to Diane. You added hours for coverage in that to get to the wages because it's
Yes,
slightly higher than a point and a half.
we were a little short with what we estimated last year for our part-time ACO, so we needed to bump that up a little bit. Other than that, there's really no, the shelter told us they're not going to see we're not going to see a fee increase this year, so that didn't go up, and really everything else stayed the same.
I saw nothing. Anybody else have anything for that division?
Just curious, numbers as far as for pets. I mean, does that stay pretty consistent? I mean, I know numbers for all the other services seem to go crazy, but I was just curious if his calls for services is.
I've got it here.
Seems like you hear him get called out on the scanner for dogs loose or hit and otherwise, but we seem to have a lot of non-domestic pets in town these days. Chickens, goats, canary mouse running around.
So I can tell you that this year, well, our 5-year average has been in Lisbon 604 calls a year, Bowdoin 86 calls a year, Sabatis 295. We generally in Lisbon we average 61% of his time is in Lisbon, 9% is in Bowdoin, 30% is in Sabatis. Obviously, the reason I have all these percentages is because it goes into the way we figure out the contract.
He still keeps busy, I guess, is a question more so than not.
Yes, there's no lack of animal issues going on right now in all 3 towns.
Well said. No other questions? Communications.
biggest change with communications, I've already mentioned to you, which was the request to have a communications supervisor. Other than that, there really isn't. We had an increase in training from the fact of one is we're trying to increase our training with our communications officers. When I came here, a lot of them were complaining that they haven't had any training, so we're trying to get them some training. Plus, if we receive the permission to have a supervisor in there, they need to go to some type of supervisor training. We can't just throw somebody in there and leave them to the wolves, so they need to understand a little bit more about what their duties would be. So we added money in there. Last year we had 960. This year we're at 1,400. Excuse me.
To be clear, that person reports to you, not to staff sergeant, right?
Yes, sir. Well, right.
The new environment.
Yes, that's the way it would, be maintained. Yep. We have money in there to run some ads if necessary. You never know if somebody's going to leave. We have recruit testing, which basically is polygraphs. They're $250 each right now. And I misspoke. Supplies, our office supplies is up basically $1,500 right at the end, account number 5375. Reason for that is one of the full-time communications officers started to have an issue with their shoulder and neck this year, and the simple fact is we have never had, since I've been here, and apparently they did at one point, had headsets, wireless headsets for everybody. So what ends up happening is a communications officer sitting there all day with their neck tilted on a phone. It doesn't make much sense in this day and age. So we looked at getting wireless headsets, and it's one of those things you get what you pay for. So to get actual, public safety grade headsets, they're $369 each, but $1,500 to get 4 headsets versus the cost of physical therapy for somebody is it doesn't really equal out. So we're fine spending the money on headsets.
I wasn't sure if they were doing the printing for the police department. That's why the police department budget went down on supplies. So.
I haven't figured out how to do that money game yet, so no, there's nothing like that.
May I ask?
Please.
On wages, it went down, but overtime went down and temporary went up. I mean, is that just reflective? I guess I'm trying to figure out where the increase at the paper I'm looking at.
We only have 4 communications officers. So what happens is if somebody's out, or in this case this year somebody left, we were limited as to who we could find for replacement time. So there's, again, it's much like patrol as far as that goes. We don't have a lot of people to draw from to replace somebody. And so to replace somebody for several weeks, we ended up using a lot of our time from our reserves. So that budget went up, and just trying to prepare ahead of time for it.
I know what Fern is trying to ask. It went down on the wage. I made a note of that. I want to double check it, especially with the supervisor wages in there. I want to make sure that's in there.
This one shows, our paperwork shows that your wages went down, your overtime went down.
5110 account went down.
Oh. The only thing that went up is your temporary wages by like $1,000. So I mean, it doesn't really reflect anything of the extra staff position on this budget.
Yeah, I want to double check that.
Okay, I'll go with a clerical error, probably on my part with that one.
I was just curious because you're talking about increasing. I'm saying, wow, he's really doing good because he's actually cut back on wages and overtime. This guy's really.
That'd be a neat trick.
That'd be good. That'd be awesome.
Wasn't it? Just to refresh my memory, it was like $4,800 was the bump for the supervisor position.
So that should have went over 200,000.
Well, we had a change in personnel too this year, so I want to see how that impacted it too.
Okay, so it may be just a difference in the idea of.
4804. Good memory, sir. Thank you.
You just usually don't get more for less, so I was just kind of curious if that number was correct.
Yeah, I want to see how that change in personnel. I want to just make sure the spreadsheet is right. So.
But the overtime wouldn't have gone down regardless of the personnel, though, right? Because I mean, you actually have less overtime this year than figured for last year. Overtime went from 3,075 down to 2,250.
3,075 was, yeah, you're right. Yep.
Were you asking for less overtime this year in the communications chief?
Yeah, for overtime is generally, if it was to replace somebody for vacation or sick or something along those lines, we have a separate account for it. Overtime is generally for, we're bringing extra people in for Moxie, something that we
Okay.
don't have somewhere to designate it. So we had enough, we're in a position with it, to be honest with you, where I thought we could safely make a cut.
So your overtime isn't, so to speak, overtime. Where is that reflected in this budget for your regular, do any regular personnel actually generate overtime? Or your 4 people that you have on staff right now, do they regularly get overtime at all?
Yeah,
or-
it's mostly
It's,
reflected
yeah, it would be
reflected.
for,
vacation
Oh,
replacement.
okay.
It's what they call
Vacation.
replacement time.
Replacement time,
Yes,
gotcha.
yeah.
Yep, okay.
and there used to be 4 separate accounts. We've put them all
Right.
into one for
That did go
ease
up.
sake, for
Yep.
switching.
Payroll a lot easier to
Payroll,
combine
yeah.
those, because they're all replacement wages, however
So,
you look
okay,
at
so
it.
your replacement wage went from 0 to 37,000, so that does
That would-
Yeah.
reflect there.
Yeah, we took 4 different accounts away. The payroll, everybody that does payroll was telling me we have a lot of accounts that we don't need, and payroll's payroll as far as the replacement money amount, so
Gotcha. I guess I just
deferred
wasn't
to the experts on that
particular
one.
part of it.
Yeah.
But the new person would be actually figured in, the bump in the supervision would be actually underneath the wage line. That
Right,
would be
that's where that would
fell.
be.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions for this division? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much for all your support.
Thank you.
Can we take a
Yes.
quick 5?
5, please.
I eat snacks.
Let it run.
No,
No?
I'll have to go in, turn it off, and then reprogram it. You're taking a break, we should.
Yep. Twilight's gonna deal with it. Good person, that way.
I have to, I guess, at this point. Everybody's running out of the room, so we can keep talking.
It's let it roll.
Yeah.
Just not that entertaining.